2.
Good morning from Washington, D.C. The 2016 presidential campaign that began 2 years ago today moves to its final stage. As directed under the U.S. Constitution, the electors meeting in all 50 state capitals. It's not the popular vote, it's the Electoral College vote that determines how we select our president, and that process gets underway this morning and this afternoon across the country. We'll be monitoring what's going to be happening. Let's take a look at the map. Again, the states in red, states that elected Donald Trump. Those in blue for Hillary Clinton. And from the November 8th elections, 270 electoral votes needed. Hillary Clinton getting 232 electoral votes. Donald Trump winning with 306 electoral votes. And as we said, all 538 electors meeting in 50 state capitals to elect our 45th president. Let's take you to the U.S. Constitution, which really frames what will be happening today in state capitals. Quote, the electors shall meet in their respective states and vote by ballot for president and vice president, one of whom at least shall not be an inhabitant of the same state with themselves. They shall name in their ballots the person voted for as president, and in distinct ballots the person voted for as vice president, and they shall make distinct the lists of all persons voted for as president and all persons voted for as vice president, and the number of votes for each, which will list they shall sign and certify and transmit sealed to the state of the to the seat of the government of the United States, directed by the President of the Senate. And so the very final stage will take place here in Washington, D.C. in early January, as the results today are certified. But if you've been following the story over the last couple of weeks, a group known as the Hamilton Electors, largely led by Democrats, trying to block Donald Trump from getting the necessary 270 electoral votes, including this web video that was released late last week.
Hi, my name is Brett Shafala, and I'm a member of the Electoral College. There are 538 of us. Since there's been some confusion about us, I want to explain a few things. Our founding fathers spent years thinking about how our system of government should work, and they wrote a constitution that has guided our country for over 200 years. Like all smart architects or engineers, they also designed a fail-safe mechanism, an emergency brake in case something went wrong. This emergency brake is the Electoral College. You may think that the Electoral College is supposed to rubber stamp the winner of the election. That is not the case. In fact, that is the opposite of what the founders intended. They intended for us to subject the winner of the election to exhaustive scrutiny, and if the candidate does not meet our standards, we are expected to elect an alternative. They were worried about the kind of demagogue who had taken control in so many other countries. So the Electoral College was charged with making sure that the president met 3 important criteria. First, they wanted to make sure that the voters elected a qualified person. Second, they wanted to prevent the election of a charismatic autocrat. Third, the Founding Fathers feared that a president could be elected who was under the influence of foreign powers. The Founders believed that even if the people failed to realize that their president-elect had compromising ties to foreign countries, the discerning members of the Electoral College could protect the country and choose an alternative president. The Electoral College is our fail-safe mechanism. And no, we've never used it before, but our country has never needed it before. We have always elected experienced statesmen, but this time is different. This is the moment Hamilton and Madison warned us about. This is the emergency they built the Electoral College for, and it is our constitutional duty and our moral responsibility to put the emergency measures into action. If only 37 Republican electors change their vote, Donald Trump will not have the 270 electoral votes he needs to be president. 37 patriots can save this country.
That group known as the Hamilton Electors, and we're going to take you to state capitals around the country, including the scene right now in a hearing room in Springfield, Illinois. And joining us live on the phone is Kyle Cheney, who has been following all of this for Politico. Thanks for being with us.
Glad to be here, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Let me begin with the story that you posted earlier today. Who are these electors? Who are these individuals?
Well, people don't really realize that behind every electoral vote that's so fought over in the election is a person, and these people are typically their party loyalists, they're insiders, they're donors, because the post has been ceremonial in the past. This year, amid a divisive primary on both sides of the aisle, people got through who were kind of newcomers or not necessarily loyal to traditional loyalists to the party, which is why you're seeing some of these restive efforts to change the outcome.
Illinois, a state that went for Hillary Clinton. At the top of the next hour, we'll take you to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, a state that flipped for Donald Trump. So walk our audience through the process that will unfold. What can we expect?
Sure. Well, so the electors will gather in their state capitals. Usually it's at the State House itself. Sometimes it's in other venues. And it's actually not really spelled out how the process works. They have to sign certificates. That's mandated under the law. And those certificates get sent to Congress, which will count officially the vote in early January. But whether those certificates are announced publicly or they're just done in sort of a quiet ceremony is sort of up to the interpretation of the state.
And normally this is a process that does not get a whole lot of attention, but just as a reminder, when we vote on Election Day, we're not actually voting for president, we're voting for the electors who are meeting today.
Exactly, and so this is usually a rubber stamp moment where they just go and just basically check the box based on what the states have decided. But this has been an unusual election from the beginning, and there's this lobbying push to convince Republicans to reject Donald Trump, knowing that there are a lot of Republicans who have concerns about him, is just another facet of this unusual year.
And Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution dictating that the elector is based on the congressional delegations in each of the state. Your story points out a couple of interesting scenarios, including in California. What can we expect there later today?
Well, I think they're sort of in wait-and-see mode. California has 55 Democrats. They're the largest electoral college delegation. I think they vote at 2 o'clock. They're part of the push by Democrats trying to stop Trump is to say, hey, we'll cast our votes for a different Republican in solidarity with you if you join us. California has the largest block of votes that could conceivably contribute to that effort, but it's unclear yet if they've gotten any signal that that's their intention.
And we learned this morning from the Washington Journal that 29 states requiring the electors to cast their ballots based on the results in those states. But that means there are a number of states that don't require that, and there's no federal mandate.
Exactly, and there's even some debate about whether those 29 state laws are enforceable. They've really never been tested, they've never been challenged or enforced because it's such an automatic vote that even in the handful of stray votes over the last couple of decades haven't been challenged. So we could see some of those tests today if election officials decide to start cracking down.
We welcome our radio audience as well. We're talking with Kyle Cheney of Political. What about Chris Superin, who is from Texas, one of the Republican faithless electors? He claims he has more that will do so, but as we saw from that web video, it will take 37 Republican electors to flip in order to deny Donald Trump the presidency.
It seems highly unlikely to get to approach that number. We've seen no evidence beyond Chris Superin. And again, Chris hails from a state where there is no law that binds him to support the nominee, and so he doesn't face any repercussions. Other Republicans or other states that do have those laws, harder to convince them to flip.
I'm not sure if you're watching us live on TV or on the phone. We're looking at what's happening in Springfield, Illinois. Just curious what's going through the minds of these electors as they prepare to do their constitutional duty in just a couple of minutes in Illinois, starting the process today on this December the 19th.
Yeah, I think we'll see how many of these Democrats have heeded the call to say, well, let's support a Republican alternative. I've already gotten word that all 4 New Hampshire Democrats have supported Hillary Clinton. Seems like a lot of things are falling into place as they traditionally would have, despite all the noise and action around this vote today.
Political reporter covering the Electoral College, thank you very much for being with us.
Anytime. Thanks, Steve.
We are approaching 10 o'clock Central Time, 11 o'clock here in the East, and we'll take you to Springfield, Illinois as our live coverage of the Electoral College vote gets underway here on the C-SPAN networks.
Good morning, presidential electors and guests. The meeting of the 2016 presidential electors is now convened. The Secretary of State, the Honorable Jesse White, proclaims this day, the 19th day of December of the year 2016, as a day fixed for convening the electors of this state to cast votes for President and Vice President of the United States. All persons proclaimed by the state of Illinois to be president and vice president electors are now requested to be in their seats. I ask all electors and guests to please turn off all cell phones and pagers at this time. Please rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It is now my great pleasure to introduce Secretary of State Jesse White, who will serve as the temporary chair until the electors select a permanent chair. Chairman White.
Good morning. The media good morning. Glad to have you on board. The media has requested to broadcast and record these proceedings. Permission is granted. It is my honor to convene this meeting of the Electoral College in our great capital here in the state of Illinois, Springfield. In addition to the electors who will be introduced in a few minutes, I'd like to recognize a few individuals. Danny K. Davis, Congressman of the 7th Congressional District, who happens to be my congressman. John Cullerton, President of the Illinois State Senate. When the American public went to the polls on November the 8th and voted for their preferred candidate for president and vice president, they were actually voting for presidential and vice presidential electors. Those electors from 50 states and the District of Columbia are meeting today to officially elect our president and vice president. Here in Illinois, we are gathering for the 50th meeting of the Illinois Electoral College. There are 20 Illinois electors who are representing the majority wishes of almost 13 million residents of Illinois. As required by law, copies of today's certified vote will be sent to the President of the United States Senate and the National Archives and Chief Federal Judge for this district. My office will also maintain additional copies of the certification of the vote for public inspection. In order for this business to proceed, I'd like to have the roll call. Each elector shall respond by saying present. District 1, Tony Preckwinkle. Present. District 2, Carrie Austin. District 3, Sylvania Tabares. Present. District 4, Jesus G. Chuy Garcia. Present. District 5, Pam Cullerton. Present. District 6, Nancy Shepardson. Present. District 7, Vera Davis. Present. District 8, Michelle Mussman. Present. District 9, William Marovitz. Present. District 10, Lauren Beth Gash. Present. District 11, Evan Duffy Blackburn. Present. District 12, Jerry Costello. Present. District 13, Carol Ammons. Present. District 14, Mark Gately. Present. District 15, Flint Taylor. Present. District 16, John Nelson. Present. District 17, Don Johnston. Present. District 18, Shirley McCombs. Present. At large, Barbara Flynn Curry. Present. At large, John R. Daly. The chair declares that there are 18 of the 20 electors for president and vice president are in attendance. Electors Carrie Austin and John R. Daly are unable to attend today's proceedings. In accordance with the provision of the Illinois compiled statutes, the remaining presidential electors must elect a replacement to the vacant seats. In accordance with the statute, I do hear a motion to nominate a replacement elector. Elector Billy Marovitz.
Thank you, Secretary White. Mr. Chairman, I nominate Patrick Daley Thompson to serve as an elector in place of Elector Carrie Austin and William A. Brandt, Jr. to serve as an elector in place of Elector John R. Daly.
Elector Maravich has nominated Patrick Daly Thompson to serve as an elector in place of Elector Kerry Austin and William A. Brandt, Jr. to serve as an elector in place of Elector John R. Daly. Do I have a second?
I second that motion.
The Elector Tiberis has seconded the nomination. Are there other nominations? There being none, all those who are in favor say aye. Aye. Those who oppose say no. The ayes have it. And with those replacements named, we now have 20 electors present. The nominations are now open for chair and secretary of today's proceedings. Elector Mussman is recognized for the purposes of a motion.
Mr. Chairman, it is my privilege to place the name of Tony Preckwinkle into nomination as chairperson and Shirley McCombs as secretary of today's proceedings.
Elector Mussman has nominated Tony Preckwinkle as chairperson and Shirley McCombs as secretary. Do I hear a second?
I second that motion.
Elector Shepherdson has seconded the nomination. Are there other nominations? There being none, all those in favor say aye, and those who oppose say no. Aye. The ayes have it, and the motion has been adopted. And now I would like to turn the proceedings over to Chairperson Tony Preckwinkle.
Thank you, Secretary White. All electors will be voting 2 ballots, one for President of the United States and one for Vice President of the United States. The ballots are located at your desks. Please mark each ballot with your preferred candidate. As I call each elector's name, you will step forward and place your marked ballots in the ballot box located to our right along the wall. I will now begin the roll call for casting of ballots for the office of President and Vice President. District 2, Elector Patrick Daly Thompson, please step forward and cast your vote. Elector Silvana Tabares, please step forward and cast your vote. Elector Jesus Chuy Garcia, please step forward and cast your vote. Elector Pam Cullerton, please step forward and cast your vote. Elector Nancy Shepherdson, please step forward and cast your vote. Elector Vera Davis, please step forward and cast your vote. Elector Michelle Mussman, please step forward and cast your vote. Elector William Marovitz, please step forward and cast your vote. Just one vote for president. Elector Lauren Beth Gash, please step forward and cast your vote.
Our democracy is founded on the principle that people will have free and fair elections. When that ideal is threatened, whether through intentional voter suppression or by direct interference from foreign actors seeking to harm our legitimate process, our entire nation suffers. There must be a thorough, independent investigation into who, what, where, when, and how this election may have been affected by anything other than the free and fair exercise of our right to vote. This election has been unprecedented on so many levels. So too must be our response. It's critical that each of us does what we can to protect our democracy. Now and for the next 4 years, I proudly cast my vote for native Illinoisan, former First Lady, U.S. Senator, and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, who has the compassion, the relevant experience, and the proven commitment to working to make our world a better place, which she has shown in her entire life. She has the temperament and the judgment to be able to make our country proud as president. Hillary Clinton may be the most qualified person ever to run for president. And I'm very honored to have her.
Elector Kevin Duffy Blackburn, please step forward and cast your vote. Elector Jerry Costello, please step forward and cast your vote. Elector Carol Ammons, please step forward and cast your vote. Elector Mark Gately, please step forward and cast your vote. Elector Flint Taylor, please step forward and cast your vote. Elector John Nelson, please step forward and cast your vote.
My 87-year-old mother is very proud of me for voting in the Electoral College for the first woman to run for president, and she's going to be sorely disappointed in the ultimate results.
Elector Flint Taylor. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. Elector John Nelson. Oh, I completely lost my place. All right, Elector John Johnson, please step forward and cast your vote. Secretary Shirley McCombs. At-large elector Barbara Flynn Curry, and actually it's both your ballots. At-large elector William Brandt, Jr. Please step forward and cast your vote.
Cast my vote for a friend for more than 30 years. I thought would be president, but I cast it, even though it was a losing cause. With a great relief, the renewed vitality and vibrancy of the American democracy, the greatest political experiment the human race has ever known, which will survive and continue.
Pardon me? All right. Perhaps my instructions were not clear. If you only submitted your ballot for president, would you please step forward now and submit your ballot for vice president? If there's anyone who only submitted one ballot rather than two, please come forward and submit your second ballot. It's
Chairperson Tony Preckwinkle, please step forward and cast your ballot.
all the ballots having been cast. Secretary McCombs will now tally the votes.
It's my pleasure to announce that Hillary Clinton received 20 electoral votes for President of the United States. Michael Caine received 20 electoral votes for Vice President of the United States. Each elector is now required to sign 6 copies of a certificate of vote, which will be distributed to the proper authorities on behalf of. Well, that's Tony's.
That's all right. On behalf of Secretary McCombs. Staff will begin the distribution of certificates for each elector to sign. The electors should be at ease for a few minutes while the necessary signatures are gathered.
C-SPAN's live coverage of the process in Illinois. As you can see, the electors are signing the paperwork, making it official, certifying those 20 electoral votes for Hillary Clinton. And a reminder that we'll continue with our live coverage in Pennsylvania at the top of the hour, noon Eastern time. Our thanks, by the way, as we continue to watch this in Springfield, Illinois, from WLS-TV, the ABC affiliate, which is providing us the pictures and transmission of this, the first of 50 states and the District of Columbia meeting today to certify the results from November the 8th, and the final step will take place in the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. But under the Constitution, Article 2, the electors meeting in state capitals to elect, in this case, our 45th president. Live coverage continues here on C-SPAN and on C-SPAN Radio. This process in Illinois will come to a conclusion momentarily. We want to remind you that our phone lines are open. Your reaction to what you're seeing in state capitals and here in Washington, D.C., 202 is the area code, 748-8921. That's our line for Republicans, and 202-748-8920 for Democrats, 202-748-8922 for all others. Again, the Pennsylvania Electoral College meeting in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, a state that went for Donald Trump. That's coming up at noon Eastern Time. And in just a moment, a conversation with the Colorado Secretary of State. Live coverage here on C-SPAN.
The certificates of vote have been received and are in proper form. The business of the Illinois presidential electors having been completed, the chair now recognizes Elector Costello for the purpose of a motion.
I second that motion.
Elector Costello has moved that the meeting of the 2016 Electoral College be adjourned, and it's been seconded by Elector Gately. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. I would like to thank Secretary of State Jesse White and the Illinois House of Representatives and Tim Mapes for hosting these proceedings, as well as the Electoral College for their participation in this historic event. I would ask all electors to please remain in the committee room for a group photo following adjournment. This meeting is hereby adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. If the delegates would rise or seated, Secretary.
Heather, can you stand up? You can keep your seats, and we're going to stand in front.
They're going to do a photo right here in your seats, okay?
And the meeting has adjourned, the first of the 50 states in Springfield, Illinois, gathering at 10 o'clock Eastern Time. It's now 10:30 in Springfield, 11:30 here in the East. And we're keeping an eye on what's going to happen in Harrisburg, also in Richmond, Virginia, in Lansing, Michigan, and in Austin, Texas. Joining us live on the phone now, though, is the Colorado Secretary of State, Wayne Williams. Thank you very much for being with us on what I know is a busy day for you as well in Denver.
Thank you very much.
Walk us through the process in your state. What's going to happen?
So Colorado law has a very specific statute. It's been upheld by the court in this election cycle. The statute provides that if an elector does not do their duty, then they have vacated their office. And that's the basic process. So they'll first be asked whether they wish to take the oath of office. If they do not wish to do that, that creates a vacancy, and anyone who the electors will fill that from the list of alternates selected by the Democratic Party. If someone then turns in a ballot that is not a legal vote, that also creates a vacancy according to the court ruling, and that individual would then be replaced as well.
Polly Baca, who is a former state senator, we talked to her last week on C-SPAN's Washington Journal. As you well know, she is among those leading the so-called Hamilton electors movement. She's a Democrat. She's trying to get Republicans to flip their votes in other states for Donald Trump, and she filed a lawsuit that failed. Can you explain what happened?
Yeah, we had two of our faithless electors who filed a lawsuit seeking to overturn Colorado's requirements to vote as the state of Colorado did, and they lost in federal court. We also then filed a claim in state court for specific instructions. The state court gave the instructions to specifically provide that if an individual does not do their duty, then they will be removed. And that's according to the state court ruling. They appealed to the state Supreme Court. The state Supreme Court turned down their appeal.
Your counterparts in Springfield, Illinois, just completing a group photo. There were 20 electors that gathered in that state capitol. What's going to be the process in Denver? How will it unfold in terms of the actual process in your role as Secretary of State?
So we have the oaths of office are taken in the governor's office, and then we'll step out into the Capitol Rotunda area for the actual casting of the ballots. And it'll be a nice ceremony. It's one that we have conducted every 4 years here in Colorado. We're confident that people will recognize the importance of giving the voice to the nearly 3 million Coloradans who voted in this election.
And let me ask you about the process that our founding fathers put in place back in the 1780s. Would they be satisfied, in your opinion, as somebody who studies the voting procedure in this country and certainly as the Secretary of State in Colorado, with the process that has now unfolded for the 45th time electing our next president, Donald Trump?
I think absolutely they would be. They would be a little disconcerted over the conspiracies that have been attempted because their goal in having them meet in separate state capitals was that they couldn't conspire with each other. Of course, modern media and technology allows for things that were not contemplated in the late 1700s. But I think the ability of states to set their own processes was something the founders believed very strongly in, which is why they designated the selection of those electors and that process to the states.
And if you could stay with us for just one more moment, I want to share with our audience what Polly Baca said to us in our conversation on the Washington Journal and get your quick reaction.
There's another option, and that is that if no candidate gets 270 electoral votes, then the vote goes to the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives would then elect the president, and the Senate would elect the vice president. And I might suggest that we have to use all avenues. We can't just stand by. And at this moment in history, I've got a specific responsibility to speak up and to stand up and to shout if I need to. I haven't had to so far, but to fulfill my responsibilities as an elector, my constitutional responsibilities, and my moral obligation to try to stop this person. Now, yes, should he become president, and that's a possibility, I will acknowledge that, then that's going to be up to the House of Representatives and the Senate to hold the line on him. And when he does, if he does not abide by the Constitution and behaves in a way that allows foreign countries to influence his decisions because he owes them or he has investments that I fear that he will use our country to make money, because he seems to think that the only important thing in the world is to make money, and he only honors people who have made billions of dollars. And that's not what America is about. We're about people who are ordinary citizens. And as an ordinary citizen, I feel my responsibility right now to speak up. By the way, I do that even though I do get criticized. But I have to accept that criticism, and in some cases I'm amused by it. But this is the way I see the world, and I see my responsibilities.
Polly Baca, a Colorado delegate, elector for the Electoral College meeting in Denver, and Wayne Williams, who is the Secretary of State in Denver, Colorado. Your reaction to her comments?
I'm concerned that someone tells the people of Colorado one thing when seeking their vote and then has now apparently adopted a different position. Trying to take away the votes of 3 million Coloradans is simply wrong. And it's my hope that ultimately our 9 presidential electors in Colorado will give voice to the people's vote in Colorado and vote for Hillary Clinton and Tim Kaine as the people of Colorado did. I appreciate the chance to visit with you. Have a wonderful day.
Wayne Williams, who is the Republican Secretary of State, joining us from Denver, Colorado. Thank you very much for being with us. And our phone lines are open. Your reaction to all of this headline from the Washington Post: the Electoral College is poised to pick Donald Trump despite the push to dump him. Joining us from the newsroom of the Washington Post is Sean Sullivan, political reporter who's been following all of this. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Steve.
So, what do you expect to happen today, if anything?
Well, I expect that Donald Trump will be elected the 45th president by these electors, but with a little bit more drama than perhaps is normal in this process. You know, this is usually a pretty academic exercise. People go in, they cast their ballots, and there's not a lot of controversy or anything like that. But as we've heard in the interviews you've done, and as we've seen in the past few weeks, you know, a lot of these electors have been receiving letters, phone calls, voicemails, emails, other pleas telling them, look, you know, you need to consider changing your vote. We don't want you to vote for Donald Trump. Hillary Clinton was the winner of the popular vote, things of that nature. Now, to be clear, we haven't seen a wide-scale effort enough that suggests that Trump could lose today, but we've seen a handful of people here and there, Republicans and Democrats, who have said, look, we're not going to necessarily cast a vote the way that our state voted. So we might see a little bit more of that pop up today than is normal. But on the whole, I would expect that Donald Trump is going to be elected because we're not seeing enough electors stray from him in the states that he won.
And the story that you and your colleagues had yesterday, front page of the Washington Post, the death threats, the emails, the harassing phone calls that these electors have been getting. What have you been hearing? There are 538 electors, and of course Donald Trump getting 306 Republican electors to secure him the presidency on January the 20th.
Yeah, it's been a really contentious process. I mean, I spoke to an elector in Pennsylvania a few weeks ago who was surprised to see so many letters arrive in her mailbox. It was stuffed so full one day. She said, oh, I thought it was Christmas card season. I thought that was it. You know, others who have received thousands of emails, things like that. This has been something that has impassioned people on both sides. You have a lot of people who don't like Donald Trump trying to urge these electors not to vote for him, even though he won their states. But you also have supporters of Trump wanting these people to stand firm and to not stray from him. And, you know, you have some electors, like I said, both Republicans and Democrats, who have said that they're not going to necessarily vote the will of their state. Well, those people have also been getting a backlash from people saying, look, you're screwing up the process here. Why don't you reflect the will of your voters and let this play out the way that it should?
We began at 11 o'clock Eastern Time because Illinois, the very first state to hold the Electoral College meeting in Springfield, Illinois. That process wrapping up as scheduled, about a half hour. And so we'll take you now to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania at the top of the next hour, noon Eastern Time. What we saw in Illinois, those cameras courtesy of WLS-TV, the ABC affiliate, the feed from Harrisburg is going to be from the State House. There is a C-SPAN equivalent in Pennsylvania. These are cameras that are controlled by the State House, and we'll have that feed from Harrisburg in about 17 minutes. And Sean Sullivan, who's joining us from the Washington Post newsroom, he'll be with us until noon Eastern Time. Kyle is on the phone from San Francisco, a Republican line. Go ahead with your question, Kyle.
Hi, good morning, and I want to thank C-SPAN for providing a transparent look for us into this process. I think a couple of other states have voted at this hour as well. C-SPAN has been pretty transparent with all of this. Unfortunately, other mainstream media outlets, I think, gave this this Hamilton electors nonsense a little bit too much coverage. Let's face it, there's no chance that there are going to be too many defections. I think there was an article in Politico that the RNC actually did a whip count, and only that one elector from Texas said that he wasn't going to be voting for Trump. So I do think the mainstream media gave way too much coverage for these people who are essentially trying to overturn the election and whip up their supporters into thinking that some kind of electoral coup will happen when it won't. Thank you, C-SPAN.
Kyle, thank you for the call and the comments. Sean Sullivan.
Well, it's an interesting point. The Hamilton electors group that he mentioned is a group of electors who have looked at some of Hamilton's writings in the Federalist Papers and have been using that to justify the conclusion that, look, if you have a candidate who is not qualified, who lacks the basic qualifications to be president, it is incumbent on the electors to stop that person from being president. And that's what they're doing. They're trying to go to other electors and say, you know, you don't necessarily have to vote for Donald Trump because he won your state if you don't think that he's qualified for the presidency. The caller's right that that movement has not gotten a wide-scale level of support across the country. But I would say that it's still notable that it's happening because, as I said earlier, in previous elections, this tends to be a really academic exercise. You don't tend to see groups like the Hamilton electors even pop up in the first place. So, I would certainly defend some of the coverage of those groups and groups like them. But I think we've made clear all along, and I think it's been pretty obvious to the people covering it, that it's really not swaying enough people to turn this election. So, notable certainly because it's different from the past, but not enough to sway the outcome, at least not so far.
5 of the 45 presidents winning the Electoral College vote, but not the popular vote. And twice in the last 16 years, of course, in 2000, George W. Bush not winning the popular vote, but winning the Electoral College. And again, 16 years later, we're seeing this with Donald Trump winning the Electoral College vote with 306 votes, but Hillary Clinton winning the popular vote with more than 2 million votes. Hillary Clinton winning 20 states, Donald Trump winning 30 states. And there you can see it in red are Trump states, including Pennsylvania, which for the first time since 1984 has voted for a Republican, a key state that flipped, securing Donald Trump's presidency, or election to the presidency, we should say. Justin is joining us from Plain City, Ohio. Democrats line. Good morning.
Good morning. In response to the previous caller, I respectfully disagree. I think the attention that this movement has is pretty warranted. And I think, the whole commenting was, to an extent, reflective of the mistrust of mainstream media, especially amongst the right wing. And I think, that's sort of a different subject entirely. But in regards to electors switching, maybe reneging on what the popular vote in states has been, once again, I do think it is notable, but at the same time, I do think it does, to an extent, undermine the process that we've had in place for since the ratification of the Constitution. So, that's just my 2 cents on the whole thing.
Justin, thanks for the call from Ohio. Sean Sullivan.
Yeah, I think what you're hearing is what we've seen kind of play out across the country these last few weeks. You have people on different sides with very, very different opinions on this matter. You mentioned, Steve, the popular vote. Of course, Hillary Clinton on pace to win the popular vote by millions of votes at this point. That's the other element here. I think that has kind of re-raised this discussion that pops up from time to time, and most notably last popped up in 2000 when Al Gore won the popular vote but did not win the presidency, of course, in the Electoral College. But this conversation that has kind of popped up across the country of, wait a minute, should we have the Electoral College? How does this work? You have somebody winning the popular vote and not winning the electoral vote. I think people are starting, just in general to kind of talk about that. It's not, a proposal that lawmakers are necessarily taking seriously right now. There's no, mass movement to change the Constitution at this point. But I think the fact that that's kind of coming up in discussions is also kind of interesting. It's drawn a lot of attention to a process that normally doesn't get a lot of attention, and I think has made kind of everyday Americans reconsider, what their opinions of the Electoral College, the popular vote, and the way we pick presidents, something that they don't normally, spend a lot of time considering.
And if nothing else, a great civics lesson in American history and politics.
Yes, definitely.
Let me get your reaction to what Chris Suprin said. He joined us on the Washington Journal over the weekend. He, of course, is that Republican faithless elector, so far only one officially saying that he is not going to vote for Donald Trump. He explained why and what he thinks the process should take from today on.
In Texas, what I did is I ran at my precinct convention, which I think there were 3 of us who actually attended it after the primary. I was elected to go to the state convention from there, and there was kind of a secondary process to confirm that decision. At the state convention, literally it was kind of boring. I threw my hat in the ring. I don't think there were any other candidates. I was actually recruited by the Trump campaign to run for RNC delegate, but no disrespect to Ohio, I just didn't want to be in Cleveland in late July with the humidity. So I ran for elector, was passing out bags of candy with stickers on it and shaking hands and making calls, and it was that simple.
All right. And so did you sign any sort of pledge that binds you in any way to vote for Mr. Trump, and will you face any penalty for failing to do so?
Well, that's a three-part answer. Yes, I signed a pledge. No, it's not binding, and I think the penalty will be determined by voters in the future. When I campaigned for this position, I said at the time I wasn't using it as a stepping stone. I'm not looking to run for Congress or state house or even dog catcher. So I said, look, I'm running without ambition or aspiration. If there's a future political consequence, so be it, but there's not a criminal consequence as there is potentially in other states.
Chris Suprin, who is the Republican elector from Texas, and Sean Sullivan, he has been getting a lot of attention.
Yeah, he really has, because he's really the sole Republican at this point that's coming out and definitively saying, look, I'm going to go against the will of my voters. I'm not going to vote for Donald Trump. Who knows, we may see a few more of those people pop up as the day goes on, but for now he's the one that I think most of the country is focused on. And he brings up an interesting point, which I think kind of goes unnoticed in this process sometimes. There is no federal law that binds electors to vote for the person who won the popular vote in their state. The penalties, the pledges, the things like that these folks sign as they become electors, they vary from state to state. So it's not as if he or any of the other 538 electors are bound by any sort of federal statute that forces them to vote for the candidate that won in their state. And I think that's what injected some degree of uncertainty into all of this. But the bottom line is he is still the only one. And as you said, I mean, he certainly is getting a lot of attention. He certainly is getting some blowback and also some support. And I think really what we're seeing is, the contentious tone of the campaign has spilled over into the post-election landscape. The campaign itself is over, but I think there's still a lot of hard feelings on both sides. You have people who are Trump supporters who are wondering why aren't more Clinton supporters just willing to accept this outcome. You have Clinton supporters saying, hold on a second, this doesn't necessarily have to be the last word on things. And so that tone that dominated the campaign for almost 2 years, that didn't end on November 8th, and I don't think that we're going to see an end to that really anytime soon. I think we're seeing it play out in the Electoral College as it's happening right now.
And this, of course, one of those days where the story is the process. We're carrying this live also on C-SPAN radio, so you might hear some background noise, some voting that's taking place. It's all part of what's happening. Of course, we're also streaming this on our website at cspan.org, and we welcome our audience here on C-SPAN television. Aaron from Pittsburgh, Independent Line, good morning.
Sure, thank you. Thanks for the call. So if I recall correctly, dissent is the highest form of patriotism from Jefferson. And as I look at this and the system that continues to kind of look outdated or antiquated, we will run into the question, will any of these electors express dissent against what, my opinion of Mr. Trump is that he fails on the first qualification, which is he qualified for the presidency? And when we look at the guy, he is modestly at best qualified to run a global business that he, effectively inherited from his father. The second point that I wanted to make was just of the nature of the EC. It is it helped to establish big business. Back in the day, it was slavery. We've raised those points, and in the modern time, big business takes the form of globalization, big energy, big war. And I think that we're going to continue to see that just as a sort of an indirect consequence of the Citizens United ruling and some of the other more architectural changes in government. Thanks.
Aaron, thank you for the call. Sean Sullivan, comment, reaction?
Well, Donald Trump's business interests continue to be a focal point, I think, not just in the Electoral College, but as he prepares to take the presidency. You have some people saying, hey, wait a minute, it's not the fact that, he's unqualified in some subjective way that we think that the Electoral College should stop him or at least consider voting against him. Some have pointed to his business interests and his ties and that complicated web as a reason why they should pause. And another aspect of this is coming at a time when we're reading and hearing reports about Russian intervention in the election and the CIA report that concludes that Russia deliberately tried to intervene to try to help Donald Trump win this election. You have some electors coming out and saying they wanted to learn more about that. So it's not just folks who are saying we think Donald Trump is unqualified for the presidency, and that's why people should vote against him. I think you have concerns about the Russian hacks and the Russian influence in this election, and also Trump's business side. So those three things together, I think, have injected much of the turmoil into this process and have driven a lot of the anti-Trump sentiment that you're seeing in these letters, these emails, these calls, thousands of them, tens of thousands, perhaps in some cases, that these electors are receiving.
You also reported the so-called whipping effort underway by the Republican National Committee to make sure that there were no so-called shenanigans today, that everything worked as expected. Yesterday on Fox News Sunday, the chairman of the Republican National Committee and soon-to-be White House Chief of Staff, Reince Priebus, had this to say.
At this point, how many possible what they call faithless electors are there who might jump ship?
Look, we expect everything to fall in line. We've got one particular individual in Texas without a faithless elector statute in Texas, but other than that, we're very confident that everything is going to be very smooth tomorrow, and this harassment from groups like MoveOn.org and the Democrat Party should stop, and it's what the American people demand.
Reince Priebus, who we White House Chief of Staff. So what has been happening behind the scenes?
Well, I think it's standard for Republicans to do their due diligence and make sure that they're not going to get caught flat-footed today or see a mass defection of electors turn away from Trump. The important thing here too to consider is that even if Trump doesn't face enough of a rebellion that puts his actual election in jeopardy, if you have 5, 10, even Republicans voting against him, the way that looks could be quite concerning to people like Priebus and other top incoming White House officials. I mean, Donald Trump wants to come in and say, I have a mandate to lead. I am the person that the American people chose. And if you're, seeing on national television and in national newspapers, you have, all these Republicans kind of defecting from Trump, it does undercut the idea that he is, the one who was chosen by the American people, especially when he lost the popular vote. So I think if you're the Republicans, if you're Priebus, if you're, the incoming White House operation, you want to make sure that, it's only a handful, or I think they hope nobody, but at least we've seen one Republican in Texas saying that he's going to vote against Trump. But you definitely want to limit that if you're the Republicans because of the way it will look to people as we head into the new year, as we head toward the inauguration. They do not want to see a wide-scale group of Republicans vote against Trump, even if it doesn't put his actual election in jeopardy.
Let's go to Carolyn joining us from Chandler, Arizona, Democrats line. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm calling. I wanted to say first that I'm a descendant of a general from Pennsylvania who fought with George Washington, and things are very different from when there were 13 states. We happen to live out west at this time, and I don't believe that the Electoral College is doing a service to the country anymore. I also believe that we need to change some things regarding the election, as in there should only be the president and the congressional things on the ballot. I heard some people in California had like 20 different issues on the ballot instead of just the presidential election. And also, I don't believe that people, should... The vote that I have is discounted compared to a place where there are hardly any people at all.
Carolyn, thank you for the call. Sean Sullivan.
Yes, Steve, that's an example of what we were talking about earlier. I think that everyday Americans are looking at the political process now in a deeper way than they perhaps have in the past. And as you heard there, I mean, she's clearly somebody who does not think that the way things are done right now is the way that they should continue to happen. So it'll be interesting to see if 2 months, 4 months, 6 months down the road, you continue to hear calls from people, petitions, what have you, for reforms to the actual electoral process, or if that fades away and people sort of channel this into another type of political movement. But certainly, as you said, we're all getting a civics refresher here. I think for a lot of people, the last time, talk about the Electoral College is, when you're in school and you learn about this stuff for the first time. And it's kind of a complicated process, but overall it's a simple idea. You have all these states, people get together in these states, they cast their ballots, and then at the beginning of next year in the new Congress they will be reviewed. And so, this is democracy at work. This is how, the founders designed the system, and we're seeing that play out in real time here right now.
Let me explain what is happening right now. We are expecting a feed from Harrisburg that is coming from the State House. We can show a picture. It is a very ornate State Assembly room in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. There are some audio issues. Again, these are not our cameras, and so we are dependent on the states providing us the feed, or in the case of Illinois from WLS. We're also monitoring what's happening in Richmond, Virginia, where electors are also meeting. That's a state that elected Hillary Clinton. Pennsylvania, a state that elected Donald Trump. So we're going to keep an eye on that. Go to it when we have some usable sound and pictures. In the meantime, Cindy from Rockingham, North Carolina, Republican line, joining us with Sean Sullivan from the Washington Post newsroom. Cindy, go ahead.
Thank you. I agree with the lady, I believe it was from Texas, that this really is not doing our country any good. And what happened, I'm just wondering, what happened to the generation of being outstanding? Mr. Trump is a brave heart, and I voted for Mr. Trump, and in the past I have voted Democrat, but Mr. Trump showed an outstanding character for America this time, and that's what made me feel like that he really cared for America. I feel like that the Democratic system is burdening the system by adding all this extra stuff right here at Christmas.
Thank you, Cindy. Sean Sullivan.
Yeah, I think one thing that is interesting that I've looked at when I've reported on this process, when I've talked to the electors, when I've talked to the people who are urging these electors to change their vote, is I've gone to some of these people and said, if the situation were reversed, are you worried about setting a precedent at all? You're urging electors to essentially make history here and go against the will of the voters in their state and vote against Donald Trump. Well, what if the situation was reversed? What if in 4 years, 8 years, there is a Democratic president who is elected by the Electoral College that some people think is not qualified? Would you be okay with that? And you heard kind of a mixed reaction. Well, some people said, sure, I would be fine with that, and others said, I would worry about that. So I think it's important to keep in mind, a lot of this is kind of driven by partisan politics. Most of the people, I would say a vast majority of the people who are, urging electors not to vote for Donald Trump in states that Trump won were either Clinton supporters or Democrats or Bernie Sanders supporters or others who did not want Trump to be president. So, it's an interesting precedent to consider setting here. If you're going to, urge voters not to vote for Trump, what happens down the road? Do you essentially upend, the nature of the Electoral College to begin with? And it's a really weighty thing. So, that's something I think electors are aware of today, and a lot of them, might not necessarily be in love with Trump, but I don't think a lot of them are willing to sit here and make history and say, we're totally going to undermine this system.
And Sean Sullivan, those electors in Pennsylvania have now gathered. They have just completed the Pledge of Allegiance, so the process getting underway 2 minutes past noon in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Let me thank Sean Sullivan for joining us from the Washington Post newsroom, and our live coverage of the Electoral College vote continues from Pennsylvania.
Please be seated. As Secretary of the Commonwealth, it is my honor to preside over this meeting until the Electoral College has organized for the official transaction of business as provided in Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution of the United States. It is your solemn responsibility to translate into a formal document for transmission to the Congress of the United States the decision of the voters of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania at the general election held on November 8, 2016. This being the day and the hour appointed by the Constitution and the laws of the United States and of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for the duly chosen electors to meet and give their votes for President and Vice President of the United States, the members of the College of Electors of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania will come to order. Please rise as Samuel Kutsaralis, Riley Daughter, Caitlin Holland, Surrit Ibrahim, McKenna Mattis, and Angelina Torres lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Pages. I now call upon the Reverend Canon Lovelace and ask him to invoke God's blessing on these proceedings.
Let us pray. Almighty God, we give you thanks for this good land which we have received as our inheritance, and pray that we may continue to be good stewards of all that's been entrusted to our care. As a nation, we have a history of sound government established by our founders for the sake of all who dwell in this land, and the freedom to choose those who occupy leadership positions at all levels of government, filled with wisdom those to whom we entrust the leadership and authority, they might seek justice and peace for all people. Be present now with the 58th Electoral College of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania as they fulfill their constitutional duty in the election of the President and Vice President of the United States. Grant them wisdom and courage to decide that which serves to promote the welfare of all United States citizens. May each of us, as citizens of these United States, take seriously our responsibility to one another for the well-being and ordering of the society of our own generation. In all that we do, O Lord, grant us grace to serve and honor your most holy name, we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Canon Lovelace. Please be seated. Chief Justice Saylor, Deputy Chief of Staff Cormos, Canon Lovelace, distinguished electors, and honored guests. As Secretary of the Commonwealth and temporary presiding officer of Pennsylvania's 58th Electoral College, I welcome you to the chamber of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives. It is an honor to convene the Electoral College in this remarkable setting. This is the third Electoral College I had the privilege to temporarily preside. Today's proceedings remain consistent with the procedures followed when the first Electoral College convened in Pennsylvania 227 years ago. It is my belief that our Commonwealth has one of the best Electoral Colleges ceremonies in the nation. Before the end of the day, 538 electors around the country will cast their votes to select the President and Vice President of the United States. The Electoral College was established by the framers of our Constitution in Philadelphia as a compromise between those who advocated the election of the President and Vice President by the states and those who support appointment by Congress. Under our federal system, the people of the United States vote for electors who in turn vote for the President and Vice President. The votes you cast today will be certified and sent to the U.S. Congress and the National Archives. On January 6, 2017, they will be counted along with those of the other 49 states and the District of Columbia in front of a joint session of Congress. In accordance with the 20th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, the President-elect will be sworn in on January 20th, 2017. In 1788, James Madison, while arguing for the adoption of the United States Constitution, stated, "We may define our republic to be a government which derives all of its powers directly or indirectly from the great body of the people, and it is administered by persons holding their offices during pleasure for a limited period or during good behavior." Today's Electoral College proves once again that the citizens of the United States are able to establish their government by choice. America's continuing history testifies to the enduring viability of our grand experiment in self-governance. As we know, President Abraham Lincoln, in his renowned Gettysburg Address, stated that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from earth. We're still here today, heirs to these lofty ideals of elective governance. Today, the will of Pennsylvania, as expressed by the majority of the more than 6 million citizens that voted on the November 8th general election, is in the hands of 20 members of the Electoral College. We continue to invest our common faith in you, esteemed electors, that you will honor the voters, this Commonwealth, and our nation by adding a new chapter to America's story of free representative democracy under which we live. Let us now proceed with the appointment of temporary officers. For the purpose of carrying on the business of this meeting, I will appoint, without objection, the Honorable Marian K. Schneider and the Honorable Peter Speaks, Deputies Secretaries of the Commonwealth, as temporary secretaries. The Honorable Jonathan Marks, Commissioner of Elections of Pennsylvania, as Chief Sergeant at Arms. And the Honorable Michael Moser, Deputy Commissioner of Elections, as Assistant Sergeant at Arms. You can be seated. The Chair recognizes the Honorable Robert Gormos, Deputy Chief of Staff to the Governor of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Mr. Secretary, I have the honor to present communications in writing from His Excellency, the Governor of the Commonwealth.
Thank you, Deputy Chief of Staff Gormos. Secretary Schneider will read the communications.
Pursuant to the laws of the United States, I, Tom Wolf, Governor of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, do hereby certify that, in accordance with the provisions of the Pennsylvania Election Code, upon receiving the returns of the electors of the President and Vice President of the United States from the election held November 8, A.D. 2016, as laid before me by the Secretary of the Commonwealth, I have ascertained that the following electors for Donald J. Trump for President and Michael R. Pence for Vice President of the United States: Robert Asher, Mary Barkett, Robert Bizzuto, Theodore Christian, Michael Downing, Margaret Ferraro, Christopher Gleason, Robert Gleason, Joyce Haas, Ash Carr, James Mackerlane, Elstina Pickett, Patricia Poprick, Andrew Riley, Carol Sides, Gloria Lee Snover, Richard Stewart, Lawrence Tabus, Christine Toretti, Carolyn Bunny Welsh, have received 2,970,733 votes, constituting the greatest number of votes of the persons voted for. Therefore, are the persons duly elected and appointed electors of the President and Vice President of the United States to meet at the seat of government of this Commonwealth, being in the city of Harrisburg, on the first Monday after the second Wednesday in December, being the 19th day of December, AD 2016, agreeably to the laws of this Commonwealth and of the United States, for the respective terms prescribed by the Constitution of the United States, to begin on the 20th day of January, AD 2017, and to perform such other duties as devolve upon them under the Constitution and laws of the United States. Signed, Tom Wolf, Governor.
Thank you, Secretary Schneider. The certificate of ascertainment will be printed in full in the Journal of the Proceedings of the Electoral College. Secretary Speaks will call the roll of electors. As your name is called, please rise in your place and answer present.
Honorable Robert Asher. Honorable Mary Barquette. Honorable Robert Bozzuto. Honorable Theodore Christian. Honorable Michael Downing. Honorable Margaret Ferrero. Honorable Christopher Gleason. Honorable Robert Gleason. Honorable Joyce Haas. Honorable Ash Carr. Honorable James Mackerlane. Honorable Alstina Pickett. Honorable Patricia Popperick. Honorable Andrew Riley. Honorable Carol Sides. Honorable Gloria Lee Snover. Honorable Richard Stewart. Honorable Lawrence Tabus. Honorable Christine Toretti. Honorable Carolyn Bunny Welsh.
Thank you, Secretary Speaks. 20 electors having answered to their names, we shall proceed with the business of the 58th Pennsylvania Electoral College. We are pleased to have one of Pennsylvania's distinguished jurists to administer the oath of office at this time, the Honorable Thomas G. Saylor, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. A Bible or Holy Book has been supplied. The oath will now be administered. Chief Justice Saylor.
Would you please place your left hand on the Bible or Holy Book and raise your right hand? Do you and each of you solemnly swear or affirm that you will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and that you will discharge the duties of your office with fidelity? If so, please say, I do. Thank you. Secretary.
Thank you, Chief Justice Saylor. Please be seated. The next order of business is the election of the President of the Electoral College. The Chair recognizes the Honorable Richard Stewart of Cumberland County for the purpose of offering a resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Resolved that the Honorable Robert A. Gleason, Jr. of Cambria County be chosen President of this Electoral College.
Thank you. Mr. Stewart. Are there any other nominations? If not, nominations are closed. Those in favor of the resolution will assent by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the resolution is adopted. The Honorable Robert A. Gleason, Jr. of Cambria County is a unanimous choice for president of this college. The chair requests the Chief Sergeant at Arms to escort the president to the rostrum. The chair has the honor to present to you your president, the Honorable Robert A. Gleason, Jr. of Cambria County.
Thank you. Chief Justice Saylor, Secretary Cortez, honorable electors, distinguished guests, and Governor Wolf, who will be joining us shortly, thank you for participating today. Thanks to all who helped organize and execute today's event, and the Governor for hosting us at his residence later this afternoon. I want to thank the electors for choosing me to serve as the president of this Electoral College. It's an incredible honor that I will never forget. Today we walk through history together. Pennsylvania has always had an important place in American history as the Keystone State. Future generations will remember this election was unconventional and fiercely competitive. In the end, history placed the Commonwealth at the forefront as the election would be decided here. Now we sit in this magnificent, majestic House chamber as the first Republican electors in Pennsylvania since 1988. To give some perspective, our youngest elector was 4 years old at the time. We're just moments away from completing the electoral will of the people of Pennsylvania and casting our ballots for the 45th President of the United States, Donald Trump, and the 48th Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence. When Donald Trump and Mike Pence are sworn in on January the 20th, they will be the President and the Vice President of all Americans, regardless of political affiliation or background. It's a good reminder that we serve as the peaceful assembly that will lead to another peaceful transfer of power between two rival political parties that continues to be the envy of the world. I know that Donald Trump and Mike Pence will be working to make America great again for everyone, and it will be up to each and every one of us to help them shape the future of our country. For me, this ceremony is the completion of a dream that is more than a decade old as the Republican chairman. The hard work of volunteers, staff, party officials, and two outstanding candidates have made this dream come true. My fellow electors, let us always remember this shared moment when we stood up for our constitutional system, followed our conscience, answered the call of Pennsylvania voters, did our part by electing the next President and Vice President of the United States, Donald Trump and Mike Pence. Thank you, and may God bless the United States of America. All right, the election of the Vice President of the Electoral College will now proceed to the election of Vice President of the Electoral College. The chair recognizes the Honorable Mary Barquette of Northampton County for the purposes of offering a resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. Resolved that the Honorable Joyce C. Hawes of Centre County be chosen Vice President of this Electoral College.
Thank you, Ms. Barquette. Are there any other nominations? If not, the nominations are closed. Those in favor of the resolution will give their assent by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the resolution is unanimously adopted. The chair requests the Assistant Sergeant of Arms to escort the Vice President to the rostrum. The chair has the honor to present to you your Vice President, the Honorable Joyce C. Haas of Center County.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good afternoon. And I would like to extend my heartfelt appreciation to all of the dignitaries and to the special guests. The importance of what we do here today cannot be overstated. In a few minutes, we will make the voices of Pennsylvania voters heard loud and clear when we cast our votes for the next President and Vice President of the United States, Donald Trump and Michael Pence. As has been previously stated, the road to this moment has been intense and competitive. However, just like with all elections in our great country, now is a time to come together, and we will unite around our new President and Vice President. The voters who have elected a team that's given hope to Pennsylvanians, from Ambridge to Wilkes-Barre, we all have stories of people who became engaged in the political process because of Donald Trump. Last week, we welcomed our President-elect and Vice President-elect back to Pennsylvania to thank us for our support. But now, as we cast these votes, our country takes one more step toward a new era. It will be an era filled with possibility and opportunity for all Americans. It will be an era in which men and women regain the pride and the solace that comes with the family-sustaining employment. And it will be an era in which our nation once again leads the battle against the dangers facing freedom in our country and in our world today. My fellow electors, I am deeply humbled to have this chance to serve as Vice President of the 58th Electoral College, and I thank you for that honor. May God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America.
Thank you, Joyce. The chair now recognizes the Honorable Gloria Snover of Northampton County for the purposes of offering a resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. Resolved that the Honorable Theodore S. Christian of Bucks County be appointed Secretary of this Electoral College.
Thank you, Ms. Over. Those in favor of the resolution will give their assent by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The resolution is unanimously adopted. The chair now recognizes the Honorable Andrew Riley of Delaware County for the purposes of offering a resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. Resolved that the Honorable Lawrence J. Tabus of Philadelphia County be appointed parliamentarian of this Electoral College.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. Those in favor of the resolution will give their assent by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The resolution is unanimously adopted. The chair recognizes the Assistant Sergeant-at-Arms to escort the Secretary and Parliamentarian to their chairs. The chair extends to the temporary officers the thanks of the college for their able manner in which they have presided during these proceedings. Thank you very much. Without objection, the College of Electors will adopt the form of proceedings of the 2012 Electoral College of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania insofar as applicable. Hearing no objections, they are adopted. The 2016 Electoral College of Pennsylvania is now organized, and in keeping with tradition, will so advise the governor. Without objection, the chair appoints the Honorable Ash Carr of Warren County and the Honorable Elstina Pickett of Bradford County to call upon His Excellency, the Governor of the Commonwealth, to inform him that the 58th College of Electors of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is organized and ready to receive any communication he may wish to make, and also extend an invitation to him to address the college. The Committee of Escort will now proceed in the performance of its duties. The chair requests the Chief Sergeant-at-Arms and committee to escort His Excellency, the Governor of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, to the House chamber. The Governor is awaiting this call. He will be with us momentarily. The members will be at ease awaiting the arrival of the committee appointed to escort the Governor. I would like to, at this time, while we're at ease, to recognize the Governor's Cabinet who is here, who we greatly appreciate them being here. Secretary Teresa Osborne, the Department of Aging. Secretary Russell Redding, Department of Agriculture. Secretary Robin Weissman, Department of Banking. Chief of Staff Mary Eisenhower. Secretary Gary Tennis, Department of Drug and Alcohol Prevention. Secretary Patrick McDonald, Department of Environmental Protection. General Counsel Denise Smiler. Secretary Kurt Topper, Department of General Services. Director Marcus Brown, Department of Homeland Security. Commissioner Teresa Miller, Department of Insurance. Secretary Kathy Mandarino, Department of Labor and Industry. Secretary Will Danowski, Office of Legislative Affairs. Adjutant General Brigadier General Anthony Corelli, Department of Military Affairs. Physician General Dr. Rachel Levine. Secretary Sarah Galbally, Office of Policy. Secretary Elaine McNulty, Department of Revenue. And Commissioner Colonel Tyree Blocker, State Police. I want to thank you for being here, and also you, Secretary. And missed one, Director Richard Flicks of PEMA. Thank you for being here. Everyone please rise. The electors will come to order. Members of the Electoral College, His Excellency, the Governor of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the Honorable Tom Wolf, and First Lady Frances Wolf.
Welcome, Governor. Okay, happy to have you here. Thank you. Speak from here? Speak from here. Please be seated. Do I need to turn this on?
It's on.
Okay. Thank you very much for that very nice introduction, and thank you for being here. I want to thank the President, I want to thank the Vice President of the Electoral College, the officers of the Electoral College, and all the electors for having me here today. And I want to congratulate you all on your role on this historic day. I'd also like to take a moment to thank Secretary Cortez, Pedro Cortez, and the Department of State for the job that they did. Once again, the employees and the staff of the Pennsylvania Department of State have done a really good job of hosting this election. During a season, as we all know, of scrutiny for the Department of States across the nation, Pennsylvania once again delivered a safe, secure, and convenient voting experience for the people of Pennsylvania. Secretary Cortez and his team are to be commended and thanked by all the people of Pennsylvania. Could we give them a round of applause, please? So today we're here to honor a tradition that is at the heart of our democracy, the selection of a president to lead our country through the next 4 years. It's a process of peaceful transition. The transition of power in the United States is unique around the world. It's special. We don't need armies. We don't need uprisings or violence to change our country's leadership. All we need is 538 people in rooms just like this all across the country doing what you're doing today. 57 times before today, once every 4 years, stretching back to 1788, in fact, to the time of Washington and Adams and Jefferson and Hamilton, the presidential electors of Pennsylvania have come together to vote, to certify and act upon the will of the citizens of Pennsylvania. Today is the 58th such occasion where Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution comes to life right here in this room. It's a truly humbling experience for me to witness it. And you should all be proud and honored to be here as well as electors of Pennsylvania. Because the actions you take today are historic. As prescribed by the Constitution, on the first Monday after the second Wednesday in December, we gather to follow through on the mandate given by the people on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. Election Day places the power in the hands of those in this room, and that's you. Today, you will officially select the next President of the United States. You will follow the will of the people of Pennsylvania. And you should be honored to have taken part in this bit of history. So I implore you to savor the walk you take to the ballot box. Enjoy it. And know that you are performing an act that echoes back throughout American history. It's the same action that has been carried out by Pennsylvanians for centuries and brought to the American stage people like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, Theodore Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, Dwight Eisenhower, John Kennedy, Ronald Reagan, and Barack Obama. It's a very, very important act. So congratulations on your participation in the current chapter of this rich history, this rich tradition, and thank you on behalf of all Pennsylvanians for doing what you've done. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Governor. This is historic. Thank you, Governor Wolf, for your message. We're very grateful to you for honoring us today with your presence and participating in the proceedings. The chair requests the Committee of Escort to accompany the governor to his chambers. Please rise as the governor is escorted from the chamber. Please be seated. We're ready to proceed with the balloting for President and Vice President of the United States. The chair recognizes the Honorable Christine Toretti of Indiana County for the purposes of offering a resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. Resolved that the electors of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, here assembled in the chamber of the House of Representatives at the state capitol in the city of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution and the laws of the United States and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, do now proceed to ballot for President of the United States.
Thank you, Ms. Toretti. Those in favor of the resolution will give their assent by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The resolution is unanimously adopted. The chair appoints without objection the following 5 individuals to act as tellers of the Electoral College. The Honorable David Urban as head teller, the Honorable Megan Sweeney as the Honorable Betsy Howard, the Honorable Charles Giroux, and the Honorable George Helkovich. The chair requests that the Assistant Sergeant of Arms escort the tellers to their seats. The chair directs the tellers to see that a ballot for the President of the United States is now distributed to each elector. Let us proceed now to the election of the President of the United States. Each elector shall write on his or her ballot the name of the person for whom he or she votes for the President of the United States. Oh, okay. The ballot for Vice President of the United States. The chair requests the Vice President of the Electoral College to preside during the election of Vice President of the United States. Joyce.
The chair recognizes the Honorable Robert Asher of Montgomery County for the purpose of offering a resolution.
Madam Vice Chairman, resolved that the electors of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania here assemble in the chamber of the House of Representatives at the state capitol in the city of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution and the laws of the United States and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, do now proceed to ballot for the Vice President of the United States.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Asher. Those in favor of the resolution will give their assent by saying aye. No opposed. The ayes have it. The resolution is unanimously adopted. The chair directs the tellers to see that a ballot for the Vice President of the United States is distributed to each elector. Each elector shall write on his or her ballot the name of the person for whom he or she votes for the Vice President of the United States.
Thank you, Vice President Haas, for conducting the election for Vice President of the United States. The chair directs the Chief Sergeant at Arms to clear and station the ballot box. As the roll is called, each elector will come forward and deposit his or her ballots in the official ballot box for the President and the Vice President of the United States. The Secretary will call the roll.
Begin with the roll. The Honorable Robert Gleason. The Honorable Joyce Haas. The Honorable Lawrence Tabus. The Honorable Robert Asher. The Honorable Mary Barquette. The Honorable Robert Bizzuto. The Honorable Michael Downing. The Honorable Margaret Ferraro. The Honorable Christopher Gleason. The Honorable Ash Kare. The Honorable James Mackerlane. The Honorable Elstina Pickett. The Honorable Patricia Poprick. The Honorable Andrew Riley. The Honorable Carol Sides. The Honorable Gloria Lee Snover. The Honorable Richard Stewart. The Honorable Christine Toretti. The Honorable Carolyn Bunny Welsh.
and the Honorable Theodore Christian.
The chair directs the tellers to count the ballots. Once the count is completed, the tellers prepare their written report. They will advise the college of the results. I want to thank our alternate electors for being here today. The check recognizes Lynette Volano, Cody Harbaugh, Mike Verb, Luke Bernstein, and Joel Jukas. chair recognizes the head teller, the Honorable David Urban. The chair directs the secretary to record that in the open meeting of this electoral college of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the Honorable David Urban certified on behalf of the tellers Megan Sweeney, Betsy Hauer, Charles Giroux, and George Halkovich that the vote for President of the United States was 20 votes for Donald J. Trump, and the vote for Vice President for the United States, 20 votes for Michael R. Pence. The chair also thanks the tellers for the efficient performance of their duties. In accordance with the law, it becomes our responsibility to certify the results. The chair recognizes the Honorable Margaret Ferraro of Northampton County for the purposes of offering a resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. Resolved that the certificates of vote for President and Vice President of the United States be placed on the table and signed by the electors. Thank you.
Resolved that the certificate for the vote of President and Vice President of the United States be placed on the table and signed by the electors. Thank you, Ms. Ferraro. Those in favor of the resolution will give their assent by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The resolution is unanimously adopted. There are 6 certificates to be signed by the electors certifying the votes cast by them for President and Vice President. The Secretary will call the roll. Electors will come forward and sign in the order in which your name is called.
Thank you, Mr. President. Begin the roll. The Honorable Robert Gleason. The Honorable Joyce Haas. The Honorable Lawrence Tabus. The Honorable Robert Asher. The Honorable Mary Barquette. The Honorable Robert Bizzuto. The Honorable Michael Downing. The Honorable Margaret Ferraro. The Honorable Christopher Gleason. Honorable Ash Kare. The Honorable James Mackerling. The Honorable Elstina Pickett. The Honorable Patricia Poprick. The Honorable Andrew Riley. The Honorable Carol Sides. The Honorable Gloria Lee Snover. The Honorable Richard Stewart. The Honorable Christine Toretti. The Honorable Carolyn Bunny Welsh. And the Honorable Theodore Christian.
Signed documents must now be directed to the appropriate authorities. The chair recognizes the Honorable Carol Sides of Lycoming County for the purposes of offering a resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. Resolve that the President appoint one elector to take charge and ensure that one package of all legally required documents is directed to the President of the Senate of the United States in Washington, D.C. by delivering them by registered mail.
Thank you. Besides, those in favor of the resolution will give their assent by voting aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The resolution is unanimously adopted. The chair appoints the Honorable Robert Bizzuto of Cumberland County to deliver the required documents to the President of the United States Senate in accordance with the resolution. The package will be opened with those of the other 49 states in the District of Columbia on Friday, January the 6th, 2017, in a joint session of the United States Senate and the United States House of Representatives for the purpose of determining the national electoral vote for the President and Vice President of the United States. In addition to the signed documents, must be distributed for the purpose of maintaining the public record. The chair recognizes the Honorable Richard Stewart of Cumberland County for the purpose of offering a resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. Resolved that the President appoint one elector to take charge and ensure that two packages of all legally required documents are directed to the Secretary of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, one of which shall be held subject to the order of the President of the Senate of the United States, the other to be preserved by the Secretary for 1 year and shall be part of the public records of his office. That one package, each of all legally required documents, is directed to the Archivist of the United States in Washington, D.C., and to the Honorable Christopher C. Connor, Chief Judge of the District Court of the United States for the Middle District of Pennsylvania, by delivering them by registered mail. Be it further resolved that a copy of the proceedings of this college be filed with the Secretary of the Commonwealth.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Those in favor of the resolution will give their assent by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the resolution is unanimously adopted. The chair appoints the Honorable Michael Downing of Cumberland County to deliver the required documents in accordance with the resolution. The chair requested the electors appointed in charge with the responsibility to seal and deliver all legally required documents meet here in the House chamber with the Secretary of the Commonwealth's designee for further instructions as to their duties immediately following adjournment. The chair recognizes the Honorable Carolyn Bunny Welsh of Chester County for the purpose of offering a resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. Resolved that the President appoint two electors to settle the accounts and expenses of this College of Electors.
Thank you, Ms. Welsh. Those in favor of the resolution will give their assent by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The resolution is unanimously adopted. The chair appoints the Honorable Christopher Gleason of Cambria County and the Honorable James McErlane of Chester County to settle the accounts and expenses of the electors. The chair now recognizes the Honorable Patricia Poprick of Bucks County.
Thank you. Resolved that the Secretary of the Commonwealth be directed to have published in pamphlet form copies of the proceedings of the 58th College of Electors of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and to be delivered to and distributed by the Secretary of the Commonwealth.
Thank you, Ms. Poprick. Those in favor of the resolution give their assent by voting aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The chair recognizes the Honorable Elstina Pickett of Bradford County for the purpose of offering a resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. Resolved that the appreciation of the electors be extended to the Secretary of the Commonwealth, the President and the other officers of the College of Electors, the Pages, Samuel Casares, Riley Dorer, Caitlin Holland, Surya Ibrahim, McKenna Mattis, and Angelina Torres, and all others for the efficient and satisfactory performance of the duties of their appointment. Be it further resolved that the College of Electors extend their sincere appreciation to the Governor of the Commonwealth for his participation in this proceeding. Be it further resolved that the College of Electors extend their sincere appreciation to the Speaker of the House, Mike Turzai, and the members of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives for allowing us to hold this historic meeting in this magnificent chamber. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Pickett. Those in favor of the resolution will give their assent by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The resolution is unanimously adopted. We have come to the end of these official proceedings. Does the Secretary have any announcements?
Mr. President, there are no other announcements.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. The Chair recognizes the Honorable Ash Khari of Warren County for the purpose of offering a resolution.
Resolved that the College of Electors of Pennsylvania, having met in the chamber of the House of Representatives at the state capitol in the city of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution and the laws of the United States and this Commonwealth, and having completed the business for which they were elected, do stand adjourned, signed die, upon the pronouncement of the benediction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Khari. Those in favor of the resolution will give their assent by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The resolution is unanimously adopted. The benediction will be pronounced by Canon Lovelace. Please rise.
Let us ask God's blessing. O God of unchangeable power and might, we give you thanks for the blessing of this day and for all who serve faithfully in the name of this nation and this Commonwealth. We pray your continual blessing upon all of us, as we have many varied traditions and backgrounds pause to celebrate during these days of early winter. May we find encouragement and strength in the transforming love made known to us in a variety of ways. May our hearts be gladdened and filled with hope as we celebrate a new year. And may your blessing, O God, remain upon us this day and guide us always, we pray. Amen.
The Chair declares the 58th session of the Electoral College of Pennsylvania adjourned sine die. Very good. You guys did a great job.
Very nicely done.
Thank you.
So much for everything. We
Oh,
appreciate
thank
it.
you.
Those cameras controlled by the state of Pennsylvania, and the audio that was cut out just as the event was sine die, the concluding ceremony for the Electoral College vote. They'll gather again 4 years from now. And C-SPAN's live coverage continues. At the top of the hour, we will take you to Lansing, Michigan. And so now we've seen two states, Illinois, that went for Hillary Clinton, and Pennsylvania, a state that went for Donald Trump. In order to introduce our next guest, I want to share with you what Professor Robert Hardaway has said about the Electoral College vote. He wrote the following, quote, "The Founding Fathers, in the interest of separation of powers, created the Electoral College to ensure that no president would be beholden to the executive as in a parliamentary democracy. In the U.S. Constitution and the Grand Compromise that united a loose confederation into a stable form of government that, by ensuring a peaceful transition of power over more than 2 centuries, has become the envy of the world." He went on to say, "For those that trust the courts more than the people and are willing to throw the nation into constitutional crisis every third election, the so-called popular vote scheme will doubtless continue to seduce whoever loses the electoral vote to a popular vote winner. And Professor Robert Hardaway is joining us from Denver. He is a professor at the University of Denver. Thank you very much for being with us.
I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you.
So let's elaborate on what you wrote and what we've seen since November the 8th until today, the so-called Hamilton electors trying to prevent Donald Trump from becoming our 45th president.
Well, they quote Hamilton for a lot of things he said in the Federalist Papers. One of the things he advocated was that we eliminate states. And just like in Russia, just have sort of lines across the country. He also advocated a sort of monarchical president who would be elected for life. But none of those proposals were ever adopted, of course, and genius as he was in terms of the financial creating the financial integrity of the United States, none of those suggestions were adopted. And he did say that the electors should be outstanding people from the community. But of course, every state now has, since 1876, has said we're going to allow the people of their states to elect the electors who are pledged to a presidential candidate.
I want to get your reaction to what John Podesta, who was the Clinton campaign chairman and former White House chief of staff, had to say about the process, about the elections. This from NBC's Meet the Press.
The question is whether there are 37 Republican electors who think that either there are open questions or that Donald Trump, based on everything we know about him, is really unfit to be president of the United States. And if they do, then he'll throw it to the House of Representatives.
So at the very least, Professor Hardaway, John Podesta casting at least some question or doubt as to what's been happening today, although so far we've not seen any strong movement from 37 Republicans to not vote for Donald Trump.
Well, it's true that in the last 200 years, about 17,000 electoral votes have been cast. Somewhere between 7 and 9 electors have chosen to violate their oath and violate the law. It's against the law to break your pledge in at least 29 states. That's true, but it's never affected an election. And of course, whether you support a candidate or not, the time to do that is during the election. The electors are obligated by state law. All the electors of all the states are obligated by state law to vote for the person who gets the popular vote in the state.
So let's take a step.
And they were not elected to I was just going to say they were not elected to exercise their independent judgment. If that were the case, an elector can simply choose Joe Blow. It's happened 7 times, but never affected an election.
What I was going to ask is, every 4 years we go through this process. It rarely gets this kind of attention. So take us back to 1787, when the Founding Fathers were creating basically the framework of our Constitution and our government, and the debate that ensued that led to the creation of the Electoral College.
Well, the Electoral College is really the basis of our Constitution. When the Founding Fathers met in Philadelphia, the small states were ordered not to participate if they were going to lose their right of one state, one vote in any kind of national legislature. And they were told if anyone starts to say you're not going to have one state, one vote, to leave the Constitutional Convention. And they were about to leave, and it looked like we weren't going to get a constitution. And then really at the last minute, a compromise was put forth. Why don't we do both? The small states were concerned about losing their equal representation, one state, one vote, in the legislature. The large states, as some people today would like to say, it should be one man, one vote. So the compromise that brought the country together was the Senate, in which each state would have an equal voice, and the House of Representatives, in which it would be one man, one vote. And then the Electoral College is actually based on that, is actually one of the 2 prongs of that grand compromise that brought this country together. And as JFK said in the 1950s, when Republicans were trying to dismantle the Electoral College and trying to undermine our federalist system, what JFK says, you're going to miss with one of those prongs. You really can't ignore the other prong. In other words, the first step would be to abolish the U.S. Senate, which many followers of Nader suggested. And if you abolish the U.S. Senate, then the Electoral College would fall as well. But probably people would be better advised to abolish the Senate first, maybe have a constitutional convention to get rid of the grand compromise that brought the country together. But that's how it came about, and that's why we have a Constitution of the United States.
We're talking with Professor Robert Hardaway. He teaches at the University of Denver in the law school. He's an expert on the Electoral College. He has written extensively about the process unfolding today in state capitals around the country, as well as here in Washington, D.C. And I want to go back to a statement that Franklin Roosevelt once said, that he created, we created, the Founding Fathers created, a republic, not a democracy. What does that mean to you?
Well, it's really very intertwined with the whole notion of federalism. One reason our country has been so successful is it balances the interests of it balances local interests with national interests. We have a constitution in a federal system based on states. And there could, some people say we should have a popular vote election. Well, that would not only undermine the federalist system adopted by the framers, but it would be totally impractical as well. We don't have a national election. We have no national election laws. Every state submits its electors under the Constitution. Every state determines. We have 51 different elections. If we were to have, say, a popular vote election, each state would have its own triggers for recount. Some would say 0.5%, 1%. Some states that were perfectly happy with the outcome would say we're not going to have a recount. So you might have 26 states having recounts. Other states would say if you raise enough money, we'll do a recount. So you'd have lobbying groups trying to raise money. It would be a national catastrophe. Fortunately, we don't have that system. In 1960, the election was so close that if we had had a popular vote election, there would have theoretically had to have been recounts in every state. You couldn't, because some states wouldn't do it, and they have a right not to do it. Some states would do it. And if we had had a popular vote election in, say, 1960, and that was a year in which the Nixon, according to the Congressional Quarterly and newspapers at the time, Nixon won the popular vote. Republicans were very upset about the Electoral College, tried to bring legislation to dismantle it. But if we had had a popular vote election, we wouldn't know who the president was today. One of the beautiful things about the Electoral College is that it isolates recounts to a particular state. In 2000, it was isolated to Florida. If in this election we had recounts in a couple of states, kind of aborted. But can you imagine if we had a popular vote election having recounts in up to all the states? So whatever the trauma of Florida, multiply that by a factor of 50, and you get some idea of what the result would be if we had such a system.
You can join in on the conversation. Our phone lines are open. 202 is the area code here in Washington, D.C., 748-8921. That's our line for Republicans, and 202-748-8920 for Democrats, and for all others, 202-748-8922. We'll get to your calls in just a moment. But first, Professor Hardaway, I want to share with our audience one of the moments that happened while we were live in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, in Albany, New York, as electors in that state also meeting, and among the electors, former President Bill Clinton. Here's what happened.
We are also honored to be at this proceeding with many elected officials from all across the state, important citizens, involved citizens from all across the state, and one very special New Yorker who we all call friend, former President William Jefferson Clinton. It's my honor to welcome him here today. There having been carried motions that the balloting for the President and Vice President of the United States begin, we may now proceed to voting. I invite President Clinton to join us in casting the first ballot.
The 42nd President of the United States, Bill Clinton, one of 538 electors meeting in state capitals around the country as the process unfolds, as outlined by the U.S. Constitution. And joining us from Denver is Professor Robert Hardaway, who's a professor of law. And what's interesting as we watch this process is really the simplicity of it all. We saw earlier in Springfield, Illinois, in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, in Albany, New York, and elsewhere.
Well, it is simple. Up until about 1876, the legislatures actually appointed the electors. But then gradually, over a period of time, every state has now said, we're going to leave it up to the voters of our state. So when you go into the voting booth, you're not actually voting for Obama or Clinton or any of the actual presidential candidates. You're voting for Joe Blow, who has said, if you vote for me, I promise when I go to the Electoral College, and I'll sign an oath, I promise I will vote for the candidate. And so it is very simple.
A tweet from Steve who says the U.S. Senate was the awful compromise made to prevent tyranny of the majority. He says the president must be the popular choice of the people. Your response to that sentiment?
Well, that was the Senate of the United States and the Electoral College are very closely bound. They were the two prongs of the grand compromise. We have a federal system. Some people would prefer the Russian system, which is simply popular vote across the board. If we had a popular vote system, say in the 1950s, I'll give you an example. One of the purposes of the Electoral College is to ensure that a candidate has broad support across the entire United States. If during the 1950s, say in the South, there had been an overwhelming popular vote for, say, a segregationist candidate, 90%, let's say, which resulted in a total popular vote across the country that narrowly beat out the other candidate, the Electoral College prevents that. You must have broad support. You must be able to win a state across a broad section of the United States. So it was one of the more brilliant purposes of the Electoral College was to ensure that if we had a popular vote election, as Donald Trump says, and he's, by the way, against the Electoral College too, or at least he said he is, we would have, he said he would have campaigned in 4 states, New York, California, Texas, and Illinois, and that would be the whole election. And but we have a bigger country. We have a hinterland. And we don't have a country like Russia or like Germany in the 1930s where they have these popular votes where you have 17 parties vying for election, which means that a minority person, a minority president can be elected. We have the Electoral College. Only 3 times in our entire history has the Electoral College not come to the same result as the popular vote, and that happens in parliamentary democracies as well. For example, in 1974, Labour didn't win the popular vote in England, but they sent more MPs. Their parliament is what we would call our Electoral College. They then vote for their leader. So that happens once in a while. Happened 3 times in our history: in 1960, 2000, and 1888, and of course in the last election. But that's our federal system, and the beauty of it is it gives us a result. With the popular vote, if we had to have 50 court cases, 50 recounts, it would go on forever. And I think the the Founding Fathers knew what they were doing when they came up with a system that would give us a stable result. We don't want to be a country like I think Italy, where they don't have an electoral college and they have 17 governments in the space of a couple of years. It's a beautiful system, and it's the basis of our Constitution.
And this is not the end of the process.
Of our federal system.
We should point out that after today, as we heard in Harrisburg, the elector is sending the ballots to Washington, D.C., and so the final step will take place the first week of January inside the U.S. Capitol. Professor Hardaway, walk us through that process.
Yes. Well, you have to be certified. You go to the votes are sent to the Congress, and then they are certified in the Congress. And someone could make an objection that they're not properly rendered. For example, if somebody was coerced. We've heard many reports of electors being harassed and intimidated. You hate to hear those things, but if something like that actually occurred, that would be the time to bring it up. And so the votes would be counted. I think we all remember that famous television video of Gore being as the vice president of the Senate, and the Senate counting those votes that resulted in him not being elected president.
Let's get to our phone calls. David is joining us from Clovis, California, our line for independence. Go ahead, David.
Hi. Well, I'm in favor of a popular vote. I think, I understand the compromise that led to the Electoral College, but I believe that in today's age, when the population just happens to be centered in a few states, it's still the majority of the electorate that is casting a vote saying, we want this individual to be president of the United States. I understand the intricacies of the Electoral College, but when a few small rural states have the power to change the election in the United States, I think that no longer is a democracy.
David, thank you, from Clovis, California. Professor Hardaway?
Well, that's actually the precise argument for abolition of the Senate. Here you have two senators from South Dakota that have just as much voting power in the Senate as say, California. And that has been the argument for abolishing the United States Senate. So that argument, once every 75 years, yes, we don't have an exact presidential election where the electoral ballots, the electoral count doesn't precisely meet the popular vote. That's true. But every day, every month, every week, we have legislation that binds us based on the U.S. Senate. So I've always said if people are determined to undermine our Constitution, if they are determined to undermine our federalist system, as John F. Kennedy said, have a constitutional convention, get rid of the U.S. Senate, and then the Electoral College will naturally fall. But again, you have to recognize we don't have a national election. When you say popular vote, you're assuming a national election. There is no such thing. Each state has an election, and each state can do their own recounts. But if you had a popular vote, there's no way to force any particular state to have a recount. And what kind of recount would you have in a close election where 15 states decide to have a recount, 18 decide not to, others say, well, if you raise millions of dollars, maybe we'll give you a recount. It would be a catastrophe. It's the kind of catastrophe that our founding fathers wanted to avoid.
Along those lines, this is a tweet, and by the way, you can send us a tweet at C-SPAN saying, Professor Hardaway, if we have a popular vote, why do the totals per state matter? When the overall total is not close, no recount is needed.
Well, each state has, it could be, if the total vote wouldn't have to be close, but as we've seen, the total vote, for example, in the last election wasn't particularly close. Hillary got 2 million more votes. And yet there were recounts in several states, because each state, if there's a close election in a state, under that state's law, they can have a recount. So what kind of recount can you have When 15 states have a recount, 18 don't. Others say if you raise money, we'll have a recount. Those can go on, and with court appeals, it could go on for months, maybe even years. If you thought Florida was bad, just wait till if we ever got a popular vote election and you have 50 Floridas all going on simultaneously.
3 elections in the 19th century that resulted in a president winning the Electoral College vote, but not the popular vote, and of course, twice in the last 16 years. You indicated in 2000 and then in the 2016 campaign. It didn't happen, by the way, in the 20th century, interestingly enough.
Well, of course, it happened in 2000, and it happened in the last election, and it happened in 1888. Some people bring up 1876, but that was sui generis. That was because there was voting fraud in several states, and it was finally decided by a presidential commission, and the vote was by one vote. The president was elected in 1876. Some people bring up the election of 1836, but at that point you really can't determine whether there was a sync between popular votes and electoral votes, because not all states at that time provided for popular election of electors. So the only 3 elections in which there clearly was a discrepancy between the electoral vote and the popular vote was 1888, the year 2000, 1960, because the Congressional Quarterly did say that Nixon had won the popular vote. Later on, some newspapers tried to say, well, maybe Kennedy won the popular vote, and you did that by counting votes for the Byrd in Alabama for electors, counting those because it was a Democratic slate. But that pretty much was a clear-cut election in which the popular vote did not jive with the electoral vote. So those are the 3 elections, not counting the current election.
And we welcome our C-SPAN radio audience as we prepare to take you to Lansing, Michigan at the top of the next hour, 2 o'clock Eastern Time. Keith is joining us from Hartwell, Georgia, Republican line.
Yes, I would like to see the Electoral College redistributed to where each state is pretty much, well, equally represented, and therefore the candidates wouldn't go to single battleground states, but they would have to work to get the vote all over.
Thank you for the call.
Maybe you could, well, okay. Of course, each state has its own rules. Its electors are based on 1 representative guaranteed in the House of Representatives and 2 in the Senate. So no matter how small a state is, it gets 3 electoral votes. That, again, is part of the grand compromise. Now, if people are really interested in having the popular vote always jibe with the electoral vote, there's a simple way to do that. Just have your state allocate the electoral votes based on the percentage of the popular vote. There have been a number of bills proposed in a number of states. A few years ago, it was proposed in California, where California could have passed legislation saying we're going to allocate our electoral votes in the same percentage as the popular vote. They didn't want to do that. There's only 2 states that do it, Maine and Nebraska. So if people are really interested in a popular vote without disrupting and having a new constitutional convention and getting rid of the states and simply having a national election, the way to do it would be for each state to simply say, we're going to allocate our electoral votes automatically. And I've proposed for many years, one reform that would make sense is to make the electoral vote automatic, to not have to go through the charade of having these little ceremonies. What happens when somebody doesn't show up? Well, each state has a different rule for getting a substitute. In one case, people didn't show up. They had to have an election, so they went out in the hallway and got a janitor to come in. What am I supposed to do? You're supposed to vote this way. Okay. I don't think we need that. It's nice to have that ceremony, but given the attention that's been given to this ceremony, and the people, haranguing and intimidating electors, I think it would be better if we simply made the electoral vote automatic. But people don't want to clean up the Electoral College and fix some of these small things because they want a Russian-type popular vote election where you may have 15, 17 candidates. People say, well, we'd still have a 2-party system. No. Maybe the two-party system under a popular vote regime would carry on by its own momentum for an election or two, but the incentive for parties to get in right now, they lose that incentive to do it because you don't even get one electoral vote unless you can get a plurality in a state. And that's why we have the sort of the good result, a definite result in election after election. The only time that we've had a really close electoral vote was in the year 2000, and even there the recount was limited to one state.
Well, let me follow up because a lot of tweets based on your comments just a moment ago, and Lori kind of encapsulates all of that, basically saying, why is it? Why is it that the electors are not awarded in proportion with the popular vote within each state? You alluded to that a moment ago, but do you want to elaborate?
Well, it's up to each state. The Constitution, one thing is clear. It doesn't say much. All it says is how their electors are determined. Well, the number of electors is determined by how many representatives they have in the Senate and the Congress and the House. How they allocate them is entirely up to a state. If a state wanted to say, we're going to do it proportionately based on their population, they are free to do that. So far, only two states have come close to doing that. Maine and Nebraska have said it's based on congressional district. So states are free to do it. But every state that has been asked if they want to do it has said no. So if people are really concerned that once every 75 or 80 years the electoral vote doesn't jibe with the popular vote, like happens in parliamentary democracies, if they're really concerned about that, number one, abolish the U.S. Senate. That'd be one way to take care of it. The other way is to simply go to your state legislature and convince them to say, we're going to allocate our electoral votes based on the percentage of votes for a particular candidate in this state. They're free to do that, and you don't need any constitutional amendment to do that.
Dave is here in Washington, D.C., a Democrat. Go ahead, please.
Good afternoon to everyone. As my professorial colleague, Mr. Hardaway, knows, there is no constitutional provision or federal law that requires electors to vote according to the results. In fact, some state laws, even though they ask electors to vote according to the Electoral College, they simply call them faithless electors and impose a fine. So it's important for electors out there today to realize that they are not bound. We live in a federal system. Federal law trumps state law. And there is no constitutional provision that requires those electors to vote against their free decision and their conscience. Moreover, we know that the fine is very small. It's de minimis. And talking about 1876 and sui generis, we have a problem here that is truly sui generis. We have a foreign hostile power that has been found by attribution of the FBI and the CIA to have interfered with the democratic process. Thank you very much.
Dave, before you hang up, just tell us a little bit about yourself and your own background before we hear from Professor Hardaway.
I am a professor of law. Before that, I was a practicing lawyer for 20 years. What we learned at Yale is what I just told you, that, to put it simply, there is no constitutional provision or federal law that requires any elector.
Dave, can you stay on the line?
Any elector sitting out there today is free to vote as their conscience tells them. Look it up. Get on the web right now. Electors, reporters, you can see this. They may be fined. You may have to pay a $1,000 fine, as some of you may have seen in various stories. But no elector has ever been prosecuted in the history of our nation by failing to vote as pledged. And Mr. Hardaway knows this. This is a fact. That's because there's no federal law. There is no constitutional provision against electors voting their conscience in the most sui generis, truly individual situation that this country has ever faced, and attributed hacking of our election by a hostile power.
Dave, thank you for the call. We'll get a response. Professor Hardaway.
Well, yeah, everybody knows that. I think even an 8th grader knows that electors can violate the law. There's no national law that requires them to vote because it leaves it up to the legislatures. And the legislatures of every state, and there's at least 29 states, a majority of states, that have made it a criminal offense to violate your oath because you're basically defrauding the voters of your state. You're representing, if you're an elector, if you elect me, I promise to vote for this candidate. And yes, there's been about 7 instances in the last 200 years where people have violated that oath. And to say it's just a fine, that depends upon whether it's a misdemeanor, whether it's what type of offense it is in a particular state. We had a case here last Friday where one of the electors came into court and said, gee, if I violate my oath and violate my representation and promise to the people of this state, would you punish me, and how would you punish me? And the judge basically laughed them out of court and said, I'm not going to tell you what's going to be your punishment. To say it's only a fine, it's a criminal act. And of course, as this professor I'm sure knows, that if anyone aids and abets committing a criminal act, that itself is a criminal act. So simply to say, oh, it's a fine, that depends upon the state. Every state has its own punishments. So that's a given, and everybody knows that they can do it. But I think the fact that only 7 or 9, depending on how you count it, 7 or 9 people have actually done that. It's never affected an election. I'm sure that if this candidate, for example, favored Hillary, he would be appalled. The first I heard after the election was that there was an elector in Washington who said that if Hillary was elected, he would not vote for Hillary. Yes, he can do that. He said that he would not vote for her because he was a criminal and so on. But I think people would be pretty outraged, and they have been outraged, when someone promises to their state and a legislature provides that you are going to run as an elector based on your promise to vote for a particular candidate. If you violate that and commit that criminal act, there are consequences in almost all the states, at least 29 states. So that's neither here nor there. Everybody knows that. That's not the point. And I've always advocated that it be automatic. Would we really want a system where the electors can actually vote for anyone they want? I mean, they could vote for anybody. It doesn't happen, because these electors are generally party favorites, party partisans, the governors of that particular party. It happens very, very rarely. And the argument that they should change their vote and violate the trust that they've given to the people of their state based on their personal opinion because they don't like a candidate, I think this professor would be quite appalled if that happened on a regular basis. It just doesn't happen. It's never affected an election.
And Lance, following up on your point, Robert Hardaway saying, quote, states' rights needs to be respected, and the Electoral College, Democrats need to respect states' rights. Let's go to Carrie on the Democrats line from Spring Lake, New Jersey. Go ahead, please.
Oh, hi, Mr. Hardaway. Thank you for the discussion. Hello. It's fascinating stuff. My point is, I think the popular vote is a non-issue. It's a country run by states. It should be one vote for each state. I think if they were going to change the Electoral College, it would be to that, where each state gets one vote. The governor can call it into Washington, and it would knock out a lot of the shenanigans that we're looking at here.
Thank you, Kerry. Let's get a response.
Well, the grand compromise was a compromise. The small states wanted one state, one vote. That's the right they had under the Articles of Confederation. And they were told by their legislatures, if anyone tries to change that, you get out of that constitutional convention. And they were ready to walk. And then there were those from Pennsylvania and New York who said, no, it should be one man, one vote. So they compromised, and I think the compromise they came up with is a very good one. It's the basis of federalism. It's the basis of our Constitution. And without that compromise, we really wouldn't have a Constitution, almost certainly. And so we have our founding fathers to thank for that compromise.
You wrote the following, quote, proponents for the view that electors were intended to exercise independent judgment often resort to citing Alexander Hamilton's view in Federalist 68 that the electors should be made by men most capable of analyzing the qualities adopted to the nation. But even Hamilton, you say, clarified that statement by noting, quote, the people should operate in the choice of the electors.
Yes, I mean, the fact that Hamilton said they should be reputable citizens, I don't think that is a suggestion that they should violate what their legislature indicates. If the legislature says, as they all have said since 1876, they've all said, we're going to let the people of our state choose the electors. And I don't think the fact that Hamilton said, well, they should be fine, upstanding people, suggests that that the electors should just go willy-nilly and exercise their conscience, their opinion, when they've already told the people of their state, if you elect me as your elector, I promise to vote for this particular candidate. The Founding Fathers said a lot of things in the Federalist Papers. Hamilton said a lot of things. He wanted a monarchy. He wanted the president elected for life. He wanted to eliminate states, just have sort of arbitrary boundaries. Those are all rejected. So when people start citing Hamilton, he was, of course, the founder of our financial system and a great person and founding father. But no one listened to any of his suggestions about a monarch or a president elected for life or any of that. And to quote that as, well, these are the founding fathers, I think is inappropriate.
And I'm just curious, I'm not sure if you've seen Hamilton or can even afford to get a ticket in New York, but whether or not that Broadway show has played into the debate that we're seeing today.
Well, I think so. I mean, he saved our financial system. I mean, we've had a sound dollar and a sound financial system ever since Hamilton. He paid off all the debts, which greatly annoyed the people who had bought these bonds for 2 cents on the dollar. Now they're going to get a whole dollar back. But he set the precedent that this United States government, when they borrow money, when they lend money, borrow money, they will pay their debts.
And I'm just curious, Federalist...
And that's been the
Federalist 68, what is in that? Why is that so often referred to in this debate?
Well, they try to, people try to extrapolate from that statement that they should be upstanding citizens. They try to extrapolate from that, that if they're upstanding, then they're chosen because they're so educated and so elite that we should defer to their judgment. But the Constitution, as it was written, says no, they don't defer to their judgment. Each legislature can determine how those electors are chosen, and they've decided to delegate that task to the people. And the electors promise to the people that they will vote for this candidate if they vote for him. And the fact that a handful of electors have chosen to betray their trust to the people is not an argument for saying electors can do whatever they want. They could vote for a segregationist candidate, they could vote for a Nazi Party member. No. They are obligated by state law in almost every state, at least 29, to vote for the people, to vote for the person that they promised to vote for according to the popular vote of that state.
From Winston-Salem, North Carolina,
of course they're
on the
not
Democrats'
required.
line.
If they were required...
you finish, I'm sorry.
Just going back to that previous question, they can violate the law. Yes, anybody can go rob a bank. I mean, that doesn't, just because you can rob a bank doesn't mean it's not a violation of law to rob the bank. Just because an elector can violate his oath, just because he can betray the trust of the people, the word can means he has the power to do it, but that doesn't mean he shouldn't be punished for it. And most states provide for punishment, and it's not just fines like a municipal offense. It depends upon the law of that state, and some are more severe than others. Provide more severe punishments for that criminal act.
Sean is next from North Carolina, Democrats line. Thank you for waiting.
Yes, Professor Hardaway, how are you?
Very good, thank you. A little bit scruffy in the throat.
I can understand. I would just like to comment that I am currently watching this segment on C-SPAN Live, and I am humbly honored to actually begin learning about this process at almost 30 years of age. And I am a very proud conservative Democratic voter. And I supported Bernie Sanders primarily in the primary elections in the state of North Carolina. And then once Bernie Sanders had conceded, I threw my hat over to Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. However, I am, unlike many voters in this nation currently, I am extremely displeased with the way of the Electoral College and this year's election had turned out. I had actually seen an article back in November from the New York Post on the internet that is actually implying exactly what is going on right now and what we are currently discussing on C-SPAN. Can you tell me, according to the article in which I'm currently reading, which states all information that you are proudly having the discussion of currently, our founding fathers were actually afraid of quote-unquote direct democracy. Could you explain that to me a little bit?
Sean, thank you. From Winston-Salem, North Carolina, we'll get a response. Professor Hardaway.
Well, no, actually, I think it was Hamilton who actually said that the electors are representatives of the people. In a country like the United Kingdom, members of Parliament are the representatives of the people, and they then vote. That's the Parliament is sort of their electoral college. The reason that the Founding Fathers did not want to adopt that model was because they didn't want the president to be beholden to the legislative branch, which is very much the case in parliamentary democracies. So they set up the Electoral College as kind of a separate Congress, which has only one function, that function being election of the president every 4 years. But Hamilton said that they should be representing the people, and I think that that's what the legislatures have decided to do, because all the Constitution says is we leave the choice of electors up to the legislature, and for some years the state legislatures actually chose them. If they had been afraid of the people, they would never, the constitutional framers would never have left it up to each state to determine how to allocate their electoral votes. But every legislature since 1876 has said we are going to delegate the choice of the electors to the people of this state. And I think that's the way it should be.
If the United States, Professor Hardaway, were to abolish the Electoral College, explain the process. What would it take?
Well, you know, the people say, "Oh, it sounds great. Let's have a popular election." We don't have a national body to even count those votes or to make rules about them. Each state decides how they're going to allocate their delegates. I honestly don't know how you would have a popular vote short of having a constitutional convention and starting from scratch, because there is no instrument to determine the votes. And the counting of popular votes, which is just simply done by newspapers, and they often disagree. In 1960, the newspapers disagreed on what the popular vote was, because how do you count, for example, popular votes in Alabama in 1960 when the electoral slate involved some electors for Byrd, some for Kennedy? Some newspapers said, well, we'll count all the popular votes for that slate to Kennedy, and that way we get a result that Kennedy won the election. Well, who's going to determine that? Each state has to determine it. And unless we're going to start from scratch, eliminate the United States Senate, leave the election of president to courts, the system we have has worked beautifully. We've been spoiled by it, because only once every 75 years do you have a situation in which the popular vote does not jive with the electoral vote. That's true, but we've gotten tremendous stability. We are, you know, the whole world admires our system. And that's why we've had such peaceful transitions of power. The only time that people have objected to this whole system and said, that's not my president, was in 1860, when many of the Southern Democrats said, Lincoln's not our president, never Lincoln, and so forth and so on. But with that terrible exception, the system has worked beautifully.
But twice in the last 16 years,
by it.
we've had a Republican president who won the Electoral College vote and not the popular vote. So the debate ensues more recently because of what we saw with George W. Bush and now with Donald Trump, correct?
Yes, and it's unfortunate, but whoever comes at the wrong end of that, for example, in 1960, the Republicans came at the wrong end of it because they had the popular vote. And so they wanted to abolish the Electoral College because of that result. I once heard an analogy. If you go to a football game and the score is 16 and you have everyone vote in the stadium, well, it should be based on total yardage rather than the points. Doesn't that a better indicator of who's the best team? And you do that after the fact. But you always get the loser of the Electoral College who then comes in and wants to destroy our federalist system. It happens 3 times in 200 years. That's not a reason to fundamentally destroy our federalist system.
We are keeping an eye on Lansing, Michigan, where the Electoral College will be gathering, and nothing is happening at the moment. We'll get a call from Teresa, Springfield, Ohio. If you could keep it brief, please.
Yes. Thank you for taking my call. I agree the premises that you're talking about. I learned that in 8th grade civics. That's what amazes me about these people protesting or standing outside of the courthouse. But my question is, why should a big state like California that's got that put Hillary over on the populist vote, how many illegals voted? You know, that's not talking about fair. That's not fair. We wouldn't want a Barbara Boxer from California picking our president.
Teresa, thank you for the call.
Well, I think you had 2 questions there. With regard to California, that was the whole basis of the compromise, except it wasn't California. It was the small states, Rhode Island and so forth, up against Pennsylvania and New York. And the small states were ready to walk. They said, we'll form our own country. You can form your country based on one person, one vote. And there was a compromise. So I think the compromise is now the fundamental basis for our Constitution. With regard to how many illegal immigrants vote, we'll probably never know for sure. Surveys have been done, I understand, which indicate that a number of illegal immigrants have actually registered to vote. But we can't really know that. And any time that there's a proposal to require people to have a voter identification or an ID card of some sort paid for by the state, they don't, for some reason they don't want that. They say it hurts minorities. But if it would hurt a minority, then the same could be said for getting a bank account or flying in an airplane. So I'm skeptical of people who put a number on the number of illegal immigrants who vote. I don't think it can be established.
Professor Hardaway, thank you for your insights and your historical perspective. We appreciate it, joining us from Denver, Colorado.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And now, courtesy of Michigan Senate TV, we take you live to Lansing, Michigan, as the proceeding getting underway now. Live coverage of this Electoral College Monday here on the C-SPAN networks.
We probably should go, maybe afterwards. Sorry, thanks. Good afternoon. As provided under the Constitution of the United States, the laws of the United States, and the laws of the great state of Michigan, the 2016 meeting of the Electoral College is now convened and will come to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, led by State Representative Tom Barrett.
Thank you. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If you'd remain standing, thank you, Tom. At this point, I'd invite Deb Drick to come forward to sing the national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Well, thank you, Deb, for that wonderful rendition. That was outstanding. If everyone would be seated, please. Our invocation will be delivered by Bishop Ira Combs. Bishop?
This time, if I may indulge you and ask all to stand again for the invocation in honor of our governor and the Lord and Savior of our nation, who has made this nation great. Almighty and eternal God, El Shaddai, Yeshua HaMashiach, supplying the needs of your people by the way of the cross. We bow our heads in the spirit of humility, giving thanks, praise, and adoration unto you for the blessings of peace, tranquility, and prosperity you have bestowed upon our great nation. We sincerely appreciate your divine intervention in America's most recent national elections and the clarity with which you spoke through the voice of the electorate. As we gather on this historic, magnanimous, and momentous occasion to commensurate and to consummate the business of the Electoral College, close the books on the controversial past, and open a new chapter to restore America's exceptionalism, give President-elect Donald J. Trump, Vice President Mike Pence, and the cabinet members to be confirmed the wisdom, civility, foresight, and wisdom to govern with humility and to appoint with conviction based on our traditional values and our nation's great Constitution. Bless their families, loved ones, colleagues, and peers. Bless our governor, members of the Senate and House, the Electoral College, and the totality of our nation as a whole. God bless America, and let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like a mighty stream. And all the people said amen? Amen. Say amen again. Amen.
Well, thank you, Bishop Combs. Nominations are now in order for the chair of the 2016 Presidential Electoral College. I will now recognize Hank Foos for the purpose of making a nomination.
Governor Snyder doing a hell of a job. I'd like to have him have the job. Let's give him a...
Thank you. Thank you, Hank. Do we have a second? We got a second. Hearing no other nominations, our nominations are closed. Thank you. All in favor of Governor Rick Snyder for the chair of the 2016 Presidential Electoral College signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Governor Rick Snyder is unanimously elected chair of the 2016 Presidential Electoral College. Thank you. Thank you. Please be seated. And thank you for that honor. You are a little out of order, but John, what will you share with us? You have a statement you'd like us to enter? Okay. It's signed by all the electors. Okay, we have a second. All in favor of having the statement read, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. You may read your statement.
Whereas the signers of the Constitution understood the natural instinct of man to govern in such a way as to benefit themselves, their loved ones, and those who may profit from them. And whereas our founding fathers, guided by divine intervention, created a system of checks and balance described in the document called the Constitution of the United States of America. And whereas no president in the United States of America has ever been elected by direct popular vote, but by a system described in the Constitution of the United States of America, and whereas Article 2, Section 1 states each state shall appoint in such a manner as legislature thereof may direct a number of electors equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which that state may be entitled in the Congress, but no senator or representative or person holding office of trust or profit under the United States shall be appointed an elector. And whereas the state of Michigan has 2 senators and 14 U.S. representatives, so Michigan is allotted 16 electors. These electors are elected to their state convention at their respective congressional districts, with the party having 2 at-large appointed positions. And whereas Republican Donald J. Trump won Michigan's popular vote by the narrowest margin in Michigan's history, winning 306 of the 270 electors needed to secure his place in history as our 45th President of the United States of America. We hereby recognize and thank the following electors for their willingness to serve in the electoral process and congratulate you on being bestowed the honor of representing the citizens of your district and the citizens of our great state of Michigan. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you. If you can please provide a copy of that to the Secretary for the minutes, please. I would like to appoint Lieutenant Governor Brian Kelly, Secretary of State Ruth Johnson, Attorney General Bill Schuette as assistant chairs. Thank you for your service. Stand up. Senate Majority Leader Arlen Meekoff as Secretary, State Representative Brant Iden as Assistant Secretary, Speaker of the House Kevin Cotter as Parliamentarian, and State Representative Tom Leonard as Assistant Parliamentarian. Thank you for your service. Oh, stand up now, guys. I've not known such august people to be as shy as they are today. Thank you for sharing with us. And thank you for your assistance. The role of official electors of President and Vice President of the United States will now be called. Indicate your presence by stating here when your name is called. Elector at Large, Hank Fuse. Just got to yell out here, Hank. Elector at Large, Joseph Guzman. First District, John Haggard. Second District, Jack Holmes. Third District, Kelly Mitchell. Fourth District, Judy Panos. Fifth District, Henry Hatter. Sixth District, Robert Waite. Seventh District, Wickham Seelig. Eighth District, Ross Ensign. Ninth District, Michael Bainarian. Very good. 10th District, Brian Fairbrother. 11th District, Ken Greider. 12th District, Mary Vaughn. 13th District, Jim Rhodes. 14th District, William Rotterdam. Very good. All electors are present. Chief Justice Bob Young will now give the oath of office. Chief Justice.
Thank you very much. There are many occasions I've been blessed. This is none more poignant than this. Will the electors please stand and raise your right hand? Looks like all of you figured out the right hand. Okay, good. Now, do you solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this state, and that you will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of Elector of President and Vice President of the United States according to the best of your ability? Congratulations.
I'd now like to appoint the Sergeant at Arms for the 2016 Presidential Electoral College. Ronna Romney McDaniel of the 11th Congressional District, State Representative Eric Nesbitt of the 6th Congressional District, Steve Ostro of the 4th Congressional District, and Andrea Pollack of the 3rd Congressional District. You'd please be recognized. Thank you for your service. Nominations are now in order for the office of President of the United States. I now recognize Michael Bainarian for the purpose of a nomination.
Ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you today with the high honor and privilege of nominating a man who carries the hopes and dreams of millions of Michiganders and Americans, Democrats, Republicans, and Independents alike, on his shoulders. A man who has been given the opportunity to restore the American dream, which has been out of reach for so many Americans for far too long. So I ask that all of you stand with me today to support such a man. Stand with me as I nominate Donald J. Trump for President of the United States of America.
Thank you for that nomination. Do I have a second? Multiple seconds. Very good. Are there any other nominations for the office of President of the United States? Hearing none, I call for a vote by ballot. To facilitate the voting, I'd like to call upon our Sergeant at Arms to please step forward and distribute ballots for the office of the President of the United States. Please indicate your vote on the ballot by signing your name after the candidate of your preference. Sergeants, would you please collect the ballots and tally them? Very good. Thank you. Donald J. Trump received 16 electoral votes from the state of Michigan. Very exciting. We have more work to be done. Nominations are now in order for the office of Vice President of the United States. I recognize Joseph Guzman for the purpose of a nomination.
Mr. Chairman, it is a distinct honor to nominate Governor Mike Pence for Vice President of the United States.
Great. I appreciate that. Do we have a second? We have a second. Are there any other nominations for the office of Vice President of the United States? Yeah. Hearing none, I call for a vote by ballot. Sergeants, would you please step forward and distribute the ballots for the office of Vice President of the United States? Thank you. Yeah, please indicate on your vote by writing the name of the candidate of your preference. Sergeants, please collect the ballots and tally them. It's good we have the next generation of democracy up here front with us. I'm pleased to report Mike Pence received all 16 votes from the state of Michigan. We don't have that. Well, we'll see. Well, congratulations to Donald J. Trump and Mike Pence for their elections. Thank you for your good work. We have more work to be done, though. We're going to put you to work again. It's now time to sign the certificates of vote for President and Vice President. Each official elector must sign each of the 6 certificates to certify Donald J. Trump for the office of President of the United States and Mike Pence for the office of Vice President of the United States. I now invite all electors to come forward and sign the certificates. The Sergeant at Arms will begin releasing the electors one by one. So we'll ask you to come forward and sign 6 times, and the sergeants will come get you to put your signatures down.
courtesy of Michigan Senate Television and the proceedings in the state capital of Lansing, Michigan. The electoral votes in Michigan going to Donald Trump, one of three key pivotal states that turned the election for Donald Trump: Michigan, Pennsylvania. The scene in Lansing, Michigan, one of three key states that turned the election in favor of Donald Trump. Of course, Pennsylvania and Wisconsin also flipping from blue states to red states. You can see the map from the November 8th results, and today in state capitals and in Washington, D.C., the Electoral College meeting to certify the election to elect Donald Trump as our 45th president. There had been an effort by the Hamilton electors to stop the process as dictated by the U.S. Constitution. Our phone lines are open at 202-748-8921. That's our line for Republicans, and 202-748-8920 for Democrats. If you're an independent, 202-748-8922. Our coverage began at about 11 o'clock this morning in Springfield, Illinois, and then we proceeded to show you what was happening in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and now in Lansing, Michigan. Also in Albany, New York, as the electors gathering to meet, and among the electors, former President Bill Clinton, who was on hand. I think we can go back to Lansing, Michigan. The audio is back. We'll see what's happening as they wrap up the proceedings there. So what you're seeing is the video, but there is no audio. This is the feed from Michigan Television, the Senate TV in Lansing, Michigan, and there's the governor who is thanking those electors casting their ballots for Donald Trump. William is on the phone from McMinnville, Tennessee, Democrats line. Go ahead, please. Your thoughts on what's been happening on this Monday in December.
Well, my question is, I know there's a lot of people that are signing petitions to do away with the Electoral College. My question is, why can't something be done with the Electoral College to make it reflect the popular vote more and more often and more fairly?
Would you want to completely disband the Electoral College proceedings?
No, I don't see doing away with it, because it would make a lot of changes, like doing away with the Senate and stuff like that. Why can't they just make a change in the Electoral College to make it reflect the popular vote nationwide more than it does?
Okay, thanks for the call. Next to Richard in Weirton, West Virginia, independent line. Good afternoon. Richard, you're on the air. Go ahead, please. Oh, there's a little bit of a delay. Let's go on to Tiffany, who's joining us from North Carolina, Republican line. Good afternoon, Tiffany.
Good afternoon.
You're on the air. Go ahead. Your thoughts about the voting going on in state capitals around the country.
I just want to say I'm proud of the Electoral for voting with their state, and let's make America great again.
Tiffany, thanks for the call. Let's listen in again to the governor of Michigan.
We're asking you to get up and make another trip. This is in line with Healthy Michigan. You're getting your steps in today.
You know, we should explain, when we get these feeds from state capitals around the country, we're beholden to the audio and video, and so we apologize. The audio has been coming in and out. We've wanted to get a sense of everything that's been happening in Lansing, Michigan. We heard from the governor just a moment ago, but the proceedings, the official proceedings, are now over, and Michigan's electoral votes are going to Donald Trump. We're going to let you see what happened in Albany, New York from earlier this afternoon, and also we're keeping an eye on the events in Austin, Texas. But for the moment, we want to hear from you. Daniel from Saratoga, California, Democrats line. Your thoughts on all of this?
Yeah, my thought is, why, like a company, we can't have Clinton win, because Donald Trump rig the election with Russia. I think we need Clinton to win this if she won the popular vote.
We'll go to Tabitha, Springfield, Missouri, independent line. Good afternoon.
I think we need.
Hello?
Yeah, Tabitha, there's a delay, so turn the volume down. Otherwise, we're going to have to move on.
Springfield, Missouri, independent line.
Tabitha, please go ahead.
Hello?
Yeah, you're on the air, but you got to turn the volume down.
One moment. Hello?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
One more time, we're going to have to move on.
Oh, I was just wanting to make a comment. Oh. Hello?
Okay, we're going to have to move on. If you get through, please turn the volume down. Otherwise, we get the delay. Jesse from Georgia, Republican line. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I have a question. I want to know why all of a sudden do away with the constitutional electoral college liberals are getting all the airtime, because it's feeding them to keep doing this, to want to all of a sudden do away with it because they're not happy because of the outcome of the election. It's been like this for years and years. And I just want to know, why do they keep getting this airtime?
Jesse, thank you. Robert is next from the Bronx in New York, Democrats line. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. A lot of these Democrats of mine, and I'm a progressive, and people say to cut the Electoral College, but what goes in place of that? There's nothing. That's why I believe that we should award how Hillary Clinton, say, if she wins 60% of the vote in New York, then 60% of the electors in New York go for Clinton, and vice versa, you know? But no, everyone just wants to go all or nothing, and it's depressing.
Robert, thanks for the call. 202 is the area code 748-8920. Our line for Democrats, and 202-748-8921 for Republicans. And we have a line for all others at 202-748-8922. We welcome our listeners on C-SPAN Radio. Gene from Houston, Texas. You are next, independent line. Gene, go ahead, please.
Hi. I enjoyed the lesson today on government law and everything, but let's drill down on the current events. The left is claiming that the Russians hacked this election, so that seems to be what's pushing the reason for wanting the electors to change the vote of their state citizenry.
Some of the electors were demanding an intelligence briefing before the voting took place today, but of course it's dictated in the Constitution the first Monday after the second Wednesday that the electors would meet in state capitals and here in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm just curious, does anyone on this panel or anyone listening, is it really believable that the Russians hacked our election? I mean, if this is not a serious question, it seems like this is all pretty much an exercise of futility. I don't understand. In my mind, the truth is, Russians hack everything that's hackable in the U.S., but there's absolutely zero evidence that the Russians hacked this election. Okay, but this charade goes on, and I guess my point is, why are we even having this debate about Hamilton electors right now? Why are we having this debate? Thanks.
Gene, thank you for your call. Another tweet from another viewer saying 3 students traveled to Springfield, Illinois to interview the Secretary of State for their C-SPAN project. And of course, the C-SPAN in the Classroom project, you can get more information by logging onto our website. The message you want to give to our 45th president. And so we look forward to showing those to you in the new year. Claire is joining us, Sun City, West Arizona. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, and thank you for the show.
Sure.
I'm enjoying watching this.
It's interesting, isn't it? It really is a civics lesson.
It really is. What I think, I majored in history and business in school, so what I find interesting about this is how many voters don't even understand the Electoral College, number one. Number two, they talk about the popular vote. Well, with the Electoral College, each candidate is getting the electoral votes of the states they won the popular vote in. So they really have no complaints since this isn't a national popular vote. Secondly, I remember when this has happened before. I mean, this has happened now 5 times in our history. 1824, 76, 88, 2000, and now. And I don't recall when this happened in 2000, people picketing all over the country. You know, I understand what they're doing, and it's not really primarily about this election. What's really happening is these, I guess you'd call them activists, some I don't think even understand what they're doing, is the Democrats for years have wanted a popular vote pushed. Mr. Soros wants it and others, and they fund it. We had a person here in Arizona who pushed it with a lobbyist, and a bunch of Republicans went along with him. I don't think they took civics in school. But if we had a popular vote only, then the East Coast, the northeast of the country, New York, etc., and the West Coast, California, Washington, Oregon, with a couple of Midwestern states, would dictate to the rest of the country who our president is. And our founders didn't want that because as they originated a country, as the gentleman said, they knew then that the populated states would then control the rest of the country. And that in and of itself would cause a great deal of disorder here. And that's what I think America needs to understand. This is a process that should be peaceful and transitional. And all these people marching in the streets and screaming and doing emails and threatening people that are going to electoral colleges, I don't get it. You had an election, you lost. Okay, 2-4 years, you'll have another one. Maybe you'll win. If you win then and say you'd lose the popular vote but win some of these states, will you expect us then to sit back and just accept it as we expect you to? You lost. Don't try to change rules after the game is over. You lost an election. You had a flawed candidate with flawed policies. I'm not saying Mr. Trump is perfect, because God knows he's not. I'm a little upset with him right now myself. He's talking about the wall, but no longer deporting. He only talks about deporting criminal illegals. And if you look up the word criminal, anybody that came in the country is a criminal, because you came in illegally or you overstayed a visa. That's a crime. Crime, derivative, criminal. So wake up. Go back to night school, take civics, grow up, behave yourselves, understand this is part of life. It always has been. Mr. Nixon lost in 60 on a popular vote that many believe was most of the graveyards in Chicago. So suck it up and enjoy being an American, and thank God we have the right to vote, where some of the countries we're doing business don't, as you can see in Syria and Cuba. But I want to thank you for allowing me to speak.
Absolutely.
God bless you and have a great Christmas.
Thank you. From Sun City, West Arizona. A couple of tweets we want to share with you. This is from one viewer saying, if the electoral votes were awarded proportionally in a state, that would undoubtedly lead to gerrymandering of the electorate. And another viewer, Charles, saying, so proud of the electors, adding, thanks for your coverage at C-SPAN. We're glad to give this to you, a chance to see how this process is unfolding. Gina is joining us from Longmont, Colorado, Republican line. Good afternoon. Gina, you're next.
And after this this whole fiasco with all the dirtiness that came out and the WikiLeaks, I changed to Republican. So I think it's a great day today for Trump. And I also think that, people who are still thinking it was Russia that was involved in our election, I just don't believe it. I just don't buy it. WikiLeaks has come out and said, no, it wasn't.
Thank you, Gina. Marvin is next from Augusta, Georgia. Independent line, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. It's my understanding that in order to get rid of the Electoral College, that a constitutional amendment would be needed, which I believe requires the vote of 2/3 of the country's states. I just wanted to know, can somebody verify that for me? Thank you.
But say the question again, just so I have it clear, Marvin.
It's my understanding that in order to change the Constitution, i.e. in this particular case, do away with the Electoral College, that the country needs the ratification.
A 2/3 majority?
Yes.
Yes. Yes,
that is correct. Thank you.
Right. It would have to go back to states because the foundation of the Constitution inherently is states' rights. So thank you for the call. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Can I follow up? Yeah,
sure.
Thank you. Given that the vast majority, at least my opinion is, the vast majority of the states would consider themselves as small states and therefore favor the Electoral College, that ratification of that amendment would not occur. Thanks, and you have a good holiday.
Thank you, Marvin. From Augusta, Georgia, we'll go to Rochester, New York next. Doreen, Democrats line. Good afternoon.
Hello?
You're on the air. Go ahead, please. But you got to turn the volume down.
You're on the air. Here. You're on the air. Here.
Okay, we'll move on to Alex joining us from Laurel, Delaware, Republican line.
Yes, hello.
Yes, Alex, go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to, I appreciate the gentleman before was talking about the electoral votes, how I totally agree with what he said, that this was, installed so we wouldn't have powers of other states trying to control the election, whatever. I'm all for the electoral votes to be in place, whether you're Republican, Democrat, or whatever. I think it brings a well-balanced, and I think people are insane who would think that this is not even a constitutional thing we're doing. So thank you. Merry
Alex,
Christmas.
thank you. And of course, the final step in this process, a long campaign during the primaries and caucuses and conventions and debates and general election, today's Electoral College vote. It will officially conclude next January, January the 6th, and we'll have live coverage in the U.S. Senate as the President of the Senate, Vice President Joe Biden, will certify the results, making Donald Trump our 45th president. We'll go to Rusty from Oregon, Independent Line. Go ahead, please.
Yes. Hi, thank you. I wanted to say that I felt that the Electoral College was very important, that I was really kind of dismayed when I heard that there were people that were trying to say that it should be done away with, because I think that it's very important, and our founders set that up because of the importance of it being a fair election and making sure that the wrong people don't get in just because they might get a popular vote, that they may not really have a good their intentions might not necessarily be for the good of everyone. So,
Rusty, thank you. Thank you for the call. So what you've seen during the course of the afternoon, the video feeds coming from state capitals. We should point out that there is no official feed from Austin, Texas. We are monitoring local news coverage, and we'll be getting that feed into us. Of course, a lot of attention on Chris Suprin, who is the Republican elector, who is the so-called faithless elector. And so as that unfolds, if there is something usable that we can share with you on our website and here on C-SPAN television later in the afternoon, we will certainly do so. We also were able to cover from New York, in Albany, New York, the Electoral College vote that was meeting earlier today. We'll have that for you later in the afternoon, and all of this re-airing in our primetime coverage tonight. But right now, we'll take you back to Springfield, Illinois, where earlier today the process began, a state that went for Hillary Clinton and its 20 electoral votes. Coverage from 11 o'clock this morning Eastern Time.